Chapter 1942 No Such Person. Chapter 1942 No Such Person. Why should I apologize? Mo Shuang asked in a calm voice. To say nothing of the fact that he was telling the truth, even if he were truly lying, he wasn't someone who could be scolded by a measly one-star alchemist. He was an emperor tier. You're smearing my master! Gui Desui shouted. It was clear that he was beside himself with fury. The smile vanished from Mo Shuang's face, and he asked with an intense expression, How have I smeared him? Right now, he was extremely ticked off at Peng Huanyan. What kind of senior master was he? He had actually been pushing him toward a fire pit. What an immoral master! In any case, Mo Shuang only treated alchemy as a hobby and something to play around with. Now that he was extremely dissatisfied with Peng Huanyan, he naturally lost all interest in alchemy as well. Gui Desui was red-faced with anger, and his chest continued to rise and fall. How was this not smearing his master? Mo Shuang had already called his master the nephew of some foolish weakling. Could he smear him any more than this? You're not only smearing my master, but you're even smearing Grand Master Zhu Feng! He shouted. Flames burst from his eyes. Alchemists naturally cultivated the regulations of flames, so they were all masters of manipulating fire. Everyone nodded in agreement upon hearing this. If this accusation stuck, Mo Shuang would definitely suffer severe punishment. Was this not the case? If Ling Han were Peng Huanyan's apprentice uncle, wouldn't that make him Grand Master Zhu Feng's junior brother? This was a preposterous joke. How could such a young person be Grand Master Zhu Feng's junior brother? Even if he wanted to boast, he should have come up with a more believable lie. Piss off to the side. I don't have time to speak nonsense with a measly person like you, Mo Shuang said in a cold voice. As a mighty emperor tier, it was naturally beneath him to pick on such a weakling. Pummeling an alchemist would be lowering his own status. Almost no one would group alchemists and cultivators together. So-called alchemists had some cultivation, yet their battle prowess was absolutely dismal. You! Gui Deshui's finger trembled as he pointed at Mo Shuang. After a while, he turned around and marched off in fury. He definitely couldn't defeat Mo Shuang. However, Peng Huanyan had no shortage of disciples who were two-star alchemists or dividing soul tier elites. Thus, he could seek the help of these people. At the very least, he wouldn't be suppressed by Mo Shuang anymore. However, Mo Shuang was filled with confidence. So what if Gui Desui obtained help from Peng Huanyan's disciples? Even if Peng Huanyan personally came, he would still have to obediently refer to Ling Han as senior uncle. Brother Mo, you've gotten yourself into a serious situation now, Yan Jia said with a chuckle. He didn't feel any sympathy for Mo Shuang at all. Instead, he was eager to see him getting screwed over. It's hard to say who's going to get screwed over, Mo Shuang said in a calm voice. He was definitely going to win this gamble. Meanwhile, if Peng Huanyan truly did show himself, he would definitely beat him up. That old geezer actually dared to screw him over? Fuck his mom. Hurry, look over there. They've already begun refining their pills, someone suddenly exclaimed. This quickly captured everyone's attention, and they all looked toward the two cultivation chambers. However, those who didn't understand alchemy could only watch on in confusion. They felt like Ling Han and Yan Wei's movements were extremely quick and dazzling. However, they were absolutely clueless about who had the advantage. Perhaps they were good at fighting. However, alchemy was an entirely different domain. Huh! Zhu Zijuan has come! Someone suddenly exclaimed. He then shouted, Young Master Zhu, come over for a moment! Before long, a tall youth was already walking over. He wore a faint smile, and he appeared as confident as could be. Zhu Zijuan was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, and he possessed astonishing talent in alchemy. Moreover, he practiced both cultivation and martial arts, so he was extremely renowned in Guanhua City even though he was still young. Young Master Zhu! Everyone started to greet him. What's wrong? Zhu Zijuan asked. He felt slightly puzzled. Why had they suddenly called him over? Those two people are competing in alchemy, so why doesn't young Master Zhu critique their skills? Someone said. Shi Xiuwen frowned upon hearing this. He was an alchemy prodigy, and even though he was only a 2-star alchemist at the moment, he had already reached the 3rd spirit refinement. At the same age, even Grandmaster Zhu Feng had been no more skillful than him. Yet, they actually wanted him to critique this competition? Who was worthy? However, there were many king tiers here, and there were even some emperor tiers. He didn't want to offend them, so he could only say, both of them are refining 2-star alchemical pills. They're about to finish their refinement. Refining alchemical pills generally took 1 month. If one were refining a celestial pill, however, it was rumored that it would take anywhere from several thousand years to a whopping several hundreds of thousands of years. Anyhow, with time accelerated by 100-fold, 1 month would only be 7 or so hours. Right now, 4 hours had already passed, so they had naturally passed the halfway mark of their refinement. 2-star alchemical pills. Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. It was no surprise that Yan Wei could refine 2-star alchemical pills. After all, he was already a 2-star alchemist. Thus, it would be strange if he couldn't refine a 2-star alchemical pill. Their astonishment was derived from the fact that Ling Han could also refine a 2-star alchemical pill. This person. Not only was he a genuine alchemist, but he was more so a 2-star alchemist. Gasp! Upon seeing everyone's astonishment, a look of disdain spread across Shi Xiuwen's face. These people knew absolutely nothing about alchemy. He continued, "There's nothing impressive about 2-star alchemists. In fact, it's spirit refinement that determines an alchemist's ultimate potential. Upon becoming an alchemist, spirit refinement is of utmost importance." Everyone nodded in understanding. In terms of alchemy, they indeed didn't have any knowledge. Shi Xiuwen was the expert. "Oh, that's right. Young Master Zhu, dare I ask if Grandmaster Shu has a junior brother?" someone asked. The surrounding onlookers instantly perked their ears up. They were all extremely curious about this. Just what was Ling Han's background? If he were truly Peng Huanyan's senior uncle, that would be fairly frightening. Shi Xiuwen frowned again. Were these people retarded? According to my knowledge, no, he said with a shake of his head. Sure enough, Grandmaster Zhu Feng didn't have a junior brother. Everyone nodded upon hearing this. Indeed, this aligned with their understanding of the current situation. After all, how could Grandmaster Zhu Feng have such a young junior brother? Mo Shuang would definitely suffer a miserable fate now. Yang Jia was more so instilled with confidence. After learning that Ling Han was a 2-star alchemist, he had truly been worried for a moment. Now, however? Meanwhile, Mo Shuang and Han Tao were both slightly dumbfounded. What in the world was going on? Peng Huanyan had personally admitted that Ling Han was his senior uncle. In other words, Ling Han was naturally Grandmaster Shu Feng's junior brother. Would a mighty 3-star alchemist make such a joke? Impossible! Then why had Shi Xiuwen denied this relationship? They racked their brains, yet they couldn't think of any logical reason. Was there some kind of misunderstanding or complication? In any case, they would sit back and observe the situation. Inside the time cultivation chambers, both Ling Han and Yan Wei had finished refining their alchemical pills. Right now, they were preparing to perform spirit refinement. At this moment, commotion suddenly traveled over from the back of the crowd. Everyone glanced back, only to see that Gui Desui had already returned. Next to him were 2 middle-aged men, both wearing dignified expressions. It was clear that they had enjoyed a lofty status for a very long time. "Who is it? Who dares to pretend to be my master's senior uncle?" one of the middle-aged men asked in a stern voice. His eyebrows were furrowed, and his fury was evident. He was called Ran Fei, and he was Peng Huanyan's second disciple. The other middle-aged man was called Shi Xiuwen, and he was Peng Huanyan's third disciple. Even though they were only 2-star alchemists, they had both reached the 2nd spirit refinement already. This was very impressive. "Ha! Young Master Zhu! Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen both faltered upon seeing Shi Xiuwen. They then walked over to greet him. They were of the same status, and they were more so his senior brothers. However, Shi Xiuwen was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, so they naturally couldn't compare to him. Chapter 1943 Confrontation. Chapter 1943 Confrontation. A reserved smile appeared on Shi Xiuwen's face, and he said with a nod, "Senior brother Ran, senior brother Shi." Although he was haughty, he didn't need to exhibit this by acting arrogant. "Young Master Zhu, someone is actually daring to pretend to be your grandfather's junior brother," Shi Xiuwen shouted. His gaze was vicious as he swept it across the surroundings, and it was as if he were trying to look for the person who had created this rumor. Shi Xiuwen faltered upon hearing this. He then flared up in rage. No wonder someone had asked him if Xu Feng had a junior brother just then. As it turned out, it was because of this. How truly audacious. This person even dared to claim to be Zhu Feng's junior brother. What else wouldn't they dare to do? Perhaps they should impostor as a celestial king's junior brother? Who? Shi Xiuwen asked with a baleful expression. He stared at the crowd, and it was clear that he was incandescent with rage. Swoosh! Everyone turned their gaze toward Mo Shuang. "Brother Mo, I need an explanation," Shi Xiuwen said in a calm voice. Even though his voice wasn't loud, everyone could hear the anger boiling underneath it. This anger was already on the verge of erupting. Mo Shuang was under immense pressure. Moreover, he was also extremely confused at this moment. How the fuck should I know what's going on? Peng Huanyan clearly referred to Ling Han as his senior uncle, yet not a single one of you knows about this. Then where in the world did the senior uncle, Ling Han, leap out from? A crack in the rock? How can there be such strange things in this world? At this moment, Mo Shuang could only remain silent. What else could he say? In any case, it was the others who hadn't made heads or tails of the situation, so what did this have to do with him? "That's right, we need an explanation!" Shi Xiuwen and Ran Fei also roared in rage. This relationship was directly related to them. If they silently accepted this relationship, wouldn't they have to refer to Ling Han as senior uncle? "Is it that person?" Shi Xiuwen asked. He finally came to his senses, and he locked his ice-cold gaze onto the cultivation chamber that Ling Han was in. Regardless of how enraged he was, there was nothing he could do about Mo Shuang. After all, the latter was an important member of an ascending origin tier force. However, Ling Han was different. This brat actually dared to pretend to be his grandfather's junior brother. Why the fuck didn't he ascend the heavens? He would wait. He would wait until this person left the cultivation chamber. At that time, he would give him a vicious slap across the face. He wore a dark expression as he stood there, and everyone could tell that there was a ball of explosive anger sitting in his chest. The onlookers all clicked their tongues in wonder. This was truly very interesting. Someone actually dared to claim to be Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. Just how retarded would one need to be to do such a preposterous thing? There was a good show to be seen. Meanwhile, Yang Jiao was filled with a feeling of triumphance. Right now, he was already itching to collect his winnings from this gamble. He would then scold Mo Shuang until he couldn't raise his head ever again. What an absolute retard! Several more hours passed, and Yan Wei was the first to leave his cultivation chamber. There was a haughty expression on his face. He had refined a 2-star alchemical pill, and he had then performed 1 spirit refinement on it. By doing so, he had elevated the alchemical pill from the medium grade to the high grade. In terms of refining alchemical pills, he was confident of his success rate. In terms of second refinement, however, he was somewhat lacking in confidence. There was a large chance that he might fail. However, he had succeeded in 1 try this time, so he was naturally beside himself with joy and satisfaction. What about Ling Han? He looked toward the other cultivation chamber, only to see that Ling Han was still refining his alchemical pill. An expression of disdain involuntarily spread across his face. How slow! When it came to alchemy, being slow and steady wouldn't necessarily lead to a better result. In fact, When refining alchemical pills, one needed to complete the refinement in a set amount of this. Otherwise, the only possibility was blowing up their cauldron. He's finished refining, but he's still performing spirit refinement. Hang on. This brat can actually perform spirit refinement? One had to realize that at least 70% of one-star alchemists didn't know how to perform spirit refinement. Only a small number of prodigies possessed the skill to perform spirit refinement. As for the others, they could only master spirit refinement after becoming a 2-star alchemist. Thus, it was spirit refinement that reflected an alchemist's skill. After a while, Ling Han finally opened the door of his cultivation chamber. Although the order in which they finished refining wasn't an absolute indication of their skill, the onlookers were already accustomed to thinking about problems from the perspective of cultivators. Thus, they instantly felt like Ling Han's skill was inferior to Yan Wei's. Yan Wei humphed coldly before saying, "Admit defeat. That way, you can at least lose with some dignity." "I don't have such a habit," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Regardless of whether it was cultivation or alchemy, he didn't have a habit of admitting defeat before even trying. "You won't feel regret until you see your own grave. Then I'll defeat you in the most comprehensive manner," Yan Wei said with a haughty expression. He raised his right hand and said, "I've refined an Azure Origin pill, a 2-star alchemical pill. I've also completed one spirit refinement." Spirit refinement. Even though there were few alchemists among the onlookers, everyone shuddered upon hearing this phrase. Being able to perform spirit refinement indicated that this person truly possessed talent in the domain of alchemy. Their future was bright and full of potential. Yan Wei was extremely young, so being able to perform spirit refinement at such an age indicated that he was a true prodigy. Even Shi Xiuwen nodded upon seeing this. "This person is indeed impressive. I wonder which master has raised such a young prodigy. Are there any 2-star alchemists present?" Yan Wei asked in a loud voice. "I am," Ran Fei replied. "Can you please appraise this Azure Origin pill for me?" Yan Wei asked. "No problem." Ran Fei approached the celestial pill and carefully examined it for a moment. He then said, "This alchemical pill is of the medium grade, and after one spirit refinement, it has now reached the high grade." Everyone nodded upon hearing this. They didn't know how to refine alchemical pills, but they had all eaten many celestial pills before. High-grade 2-star alchemical pills were already very decent, and they were at least 3 times more expensive than medium-grade 2-star alchemical pills. This was the value of spirit refinement. "What else do you have to say now?" Yan Wei asked as he looked at Ling Han. His face was filled with haughtiness and pride. He was the disciple of a 3-star alchemist, and he had come here representing his master to give well wishes to Grandmaster Zhu Feng. He was a haughty person, and he believed that it was because of his bad luck that he hadn't been able to find a 4-star alchemist as his master. Otherwise, he was sure that his accomplishment would be even greater. This belief caused him to develop a twisted sense of dignity. Regardless of what it was, he was always hellbent on gaining an advantage over others. A faint smile spread across Ling Han's face, and he also tossed his alchemical pill to Ran Fei, saying, "Help me appraise it." "Oh, you're fairly confident, huh?" Ran Fei accepted the pill and glanced at Ling Han, saying, "You're the person who's impersonating the senior uncle of my master?" Ling Han chuckled and replied, "I'm not so desperate and lowly that I need to impersonate the senior uncle of your master yet. In fact, if it weren't for my relationship with my 3rd senior brother, I truly wouldn't want a junior nephew such as your master." "How audacious!" Shi Xiuwen, Ran Fei, and Shi Xiuwen roared in unison. Their faces were filled with rage. This person had truly become addicted to impersonating others. Before the 3 of them, he still dared to utter such preposterous bullshit. Just who did he think he was? Ling Han waved his hand and said, "We can talk about whether I'm an imposter or not later. Hurry up and appraise my alchemical pill first." There was still a large pile of wagers awaiting his collection. Shi Xiuwen and the others were naturally enraged upon hearing this. Ling Han dared to claim to be the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist, and this was already a severe crime. Now, however, he was acting as if it weren't a matter of concern at all. Fine, appraise it first, Zhu Zijuan said in a solemn voice. Ran Fei nodded in understanding before beginning to appraise the alchemical pill. He opened this pill vial, and after taking a single sniff, his expression instantly changed. Even the trashiest of alchemists could act as an appraiser for alchemical pills. After all, this was the most fundamental skill. If they couldn't even appraise alchemical pills, they would have absolutely no hope of becoming an alchemist. This alchemical pill was extraordinary. Ran Fei poured the alchemical pill out, and his eyes almost popped out from their sockets. 3 golden lines. 3rd refinement. Impossible. He looked up, and this caused both Shi Xiuwen and Zhu Zijuan to glance over. Their expressions also changed. 3rd refinement. Even if Ling Han had only refined a 1-star alchemical pill, just this alone was already enough to hand him victory. No, they definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to win. Zhu Zijuan immediately shook his head at Ran Fei. Chapter 1944 Cheating. Chapter 1944 Cheating. Ran Fei instantly understood Zhu Zijuan's intentions. He purposefully coughed, and he placed the alchemical pill back into the pill vial as he did so. During this process, however, he had already swapped the alchemical pill out for an ordinary celestial pill. Meanwhile, he placed Ling Han's alchemical pill into his own spatial god tool. Humph, this is nothing but a mere 1-star alchemical pill. Moreover, it hasn't even undergone spirit refinement. What a ridiculous joke, he said in disdain. He waved his hand and tossed the pill vial back to Ling Han. Ling Han caught the pill vial, and a cold smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Did they think he was blind? They wanted to cheat him? He pointed at Ran Fei and said, "Don't try such cheap tricks on me. Return my alchemical pill to me." Ran Fei glared at Ling Han and asked, "What alchemical pill?" His brows furrowed, and he said, "Not only are you daring to impersonate a senior, but you're even trying to smear my reputation. I'm a 2-star alchemist. Before me, you're nothing but trash." Everyone was baffled upon hearing this exchange. Ling Han was accusing Ran Fei of swapping his alchemical pill out, while Ran Fei was denying this, and accusing Ling Han of defaming him. Which of them was lying? "Humph, you actually dared to impersonate my grandfather's junior brother. Just how audacious are you?" Zhu Zijuan said as he strode toward Ling Han. His eyes were blazing with fury. Zhu Feng was the pride of the Liu Clan, and he was also the pillar of the Liu Clan. He definitely couldn't be slandered by others. Ling Han smiled and said, "Obediently return my alchemical pill, and we can sort through these problems one by one. We'll deal with the gamble first, and we'll deal with my identity later." Such wanton audaciousness! You're trying to change the topic to buy time? Zhu Zijuan said in an ice-cold voice. "Kneel and apologize." On one side was a stranger with no background. On the other side was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson. Whom would everyone believe? They naturally believed Zhu Zijuan. Thus, everyone shook their head in disappointment. They couldn't help but think that Ling Han was extremely foolish. So be it if he impersonated Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother somewhere else. However, he had chosen to do so here. Moreover, he had been caught by Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson and later generation disciples. Capture him and hand him over to Grandmaster Zhu for punishment. Does such a measly person have the right to see Grandmaster Zhu? Directly punish him with death. In any case, capture him first. Many people started to shout for punishment. These were naturally the people who had wagered that Ling Han would lose. If he were captured and taken away, they would naturally win their wager. Mo Shuang was enraged, and he shouted, "Do you people still speak any reason? The competition is about alchemy prowess. What are you people waffling on about? This kind of dishonest person isn't worthy of being called an alchemist," Zhu Zijuan said as he arrived before Ling Han. He then made a pressing motion with his palm. Boom! A boundless aura surged forth, transforming into a symbol of the great Tao. Shi Xiuwen was a king tier at the peak stage of the fourth severance. Guanhua City was brimming with talents, so Shi Xiuwen couldn't be regarded as a supreme prodigy. However, a king tier at the peak stage of the fourth severance was already no pushover. How strong could a dishonest bumpkin be? Shi Xiuwen could naturally capture him with ease. Anyhow, he seriously wondered whether Emo Shuang's and Han Tao's IQ had been swallowed by a dog. They actually believed that this youth was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. Ling Han casually reached over with his hand. Pa! Shi Xiuwen's wrist was firmly caught in his hand. What? Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. To casually block a fourth severance king tier strike. This person was definitely an emperor tier. For the sake of third senior brother, I won't lower myself to the same level as you, Ling Han said. He then shook his hand and sent Shi Xiuwen flying back. Shi Xiuwen arched his back and steadied himself. However, his face was filled with shock and disbelief. If Ling Han had wanted to hurt him just then, he could have definitely killed him in a single strike. However, Shi Xiuwen didn't feel a shred of gratitude. Instead, he felt even more humiliated. Did he need to thank Ling Han? He was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, so who dared to hurt even a single hair of his? Moreover, since Ling Han was an emperor tier, why was he still impersonating Zhu Feng's junior brother? This was far too detestable. Ling Han had purely come here to humiliate others. Who's going to capture this detestable criminal for me? Shi Xiuwen said in a vicious voice. He looked around, only to see expressions of hesitation on everyone's faces. No one responded to his call for help. Those present were all king tiers or emperor tiers, so none of them would casually lower their own status to help him. 1 vial of mundane repairing pills! Shi Xiuwen retrieved a vial of alchemical pills and said, I'll give this vial of mundane repairing pills to whoever captures this detestable criminal for me. Countless people were tempted by this offer. Mundane repairing pills could repair any imperfections that one had during their journey of severing the mundane. Of course, it couldn't allow king tiers to become emperor tiers. However, it could allow low-level king tiers to become high-level king tiers, and it could allow low-level emperor tiers to become high-level emperor tiers. As such, these alchemical pills were extremely rare and valuable. Young Master Zhu! Ran Fei and Shi Yong hurriedly exclaimed. Grandmaster Zhu Feng had especially refined these pills for his grandson, and these pills were more so at the 5th refinement. Thus, their value was far above that of ordinary mundane repairing pills. It was no exaggeration to say that they were worth as much as a city. Was there any need to seek help from the onlookers? Both of them were elites at the Yangtze, so could they not apprehend and capture a measly severing mundane tier cultivator? However, they weren't aware that Shi Xiuwen viewed himself as more of a cultivator. As such, did the mighty Liu Clan need to dispatch cultivators of a higher tier to suppress a measly brat? That would be far too humiliating. That being the case, Shi Xiuwen was willing to sacrifice a vial of mundane repairing pills to capture Ling Han. In any case, would it be difficult for him to obtain more mundane repairing pills? He could simply ask his grandfather to refine more. An emperor tier stepped forward and said, I'll capture him. Such a valuable reward was bound to attract a few brave cultivators. Emo Shuang and Han Tao involuntarily shook their heads upon seeing this. Only they knew that Ling Han wasn't simply the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist. In addition to that, he was also a monarch tier in cultivation. In reality, it was the latter identity that was more dazzling and impressive. This was because monarch tiers could definitely become celestial kings. However, 4-star alchemists could only somewhat rival first heaven celestial kings. This gulf in status was quite significant. Against a monarch tier, emperor tiers were generally not even worthy of a single strike. Not to mention, this was a battle between a 5th severance monarch tier and a 4th severance emperor tier. Ling Han possessed the advantage of an entire minor level. Displeasure spread across Ling Han's face, and he said, You all like to pester me endlessly, am I right? Fine, then I'll pummel you until you're satisfied. Before me, Hudong, do you have any right to act so audacious? the Emperor Tyr said with a sneer. He immediately reached over with a hand. Boom! The sky was filled with symbols of the great Tao. He was truly very powerful, and it was evident that he was already a top-notch Emperor Tyr. With a single hand that could blot out heaven and earth, the Emperor Tyr made a grabbing motion at Ling Han. However, Ling Han simply replied with a casual snap of his fingers. Pooh! A burst of vicious sword chi soared into the sky. This was a comprehension that he had extracted from the regulation of slaughter and fused into his own sword techniques. Its destructive ability was astonishing, and it was powerful enough to slash the heavens and shatter the earth. Pooh! The colossal hand was instantly sliced into two, with a petrifying murderous aura soaring into the sky. Hudong's expression changed drastically. Before he could even shout in alarm, he had already been sent flying by Ling Han's strike. A streak of blood spurted into the air. Thud! He then heavily crashed into the ground, sending a plume of dust and smoke into the air. What? Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. A mighty Emperor Tyr had been defeated in a single strike? Just how powerful was this person? Perhaps he was a Monarch Tyr? Impossible! If he were a Monarch Tyr, why did he need to impersonate Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother? Although this title was indeed astonishing, it was no more impressive than the title of Monarch Tyr. Perhaps he wasn't a Monarch Tyr, but just an Emperor Tyr who had ventured even further. Chapter 1945 Siblings from the Liu Clan. Chapter 1945 Siblings from the Liu Clan. However, since Hudong had already been defeated, who else dared to challenge Ling Han? Ran Fei stepped forward and said, Young Master Zhu, let me capture him. It was clear that Fourth Severance Emperor Tyrs could only rival Ling Han, but not suppress him. In the Severing Mundane Tyr, perhaps only Holy Sun Lu could suppress him. Of course, Celestial Maiden Lu Han could also suppress him. However, could they command these two supreme beings? Zhu Zijuan pondered for a moment before slowly nodding his head. After receiving Zhu Zijuan's agreement, Ran Fei immediately stepped forward. Boom! An aura that was unique to Dividing Soul Tyr elites instantly erupted into the surroundings. Even though alchemists were extremely weak against cultivators of the same cultivation, Ran Fei possessed an advantage of one major Tyr over Ling Han. Thus, in comparison, he was still indescribably powerful. To a Fourth Severance cultivator, even if they were an Emperor Tyr, would still be an insurmountable mountain. The King Tyrs in the surroundings all wore expressions of disdain. This was a gathering of prodigies, yet upon being unable to defeat Ling Han, Zhu Zijuan was actually seeking the help of a senior. They naturally viewed such action with contempt. Strength was king in the cultivation world. This strength not only referred to one's cultivation, but it also referred to their ability to remain invincible against those at the same cultivation. At this moment, Ling Han also lost his patience. His voice was cold as he said, By the looks of it, I need to discipline you people for third senior brother. You still dare to utter such nonsense? Ran Fei said with a cold chuckle. He immediately charged forward. Even if he were relatively weak, he was still a Dividing Soul Tyr elite. Thus, he would possess a crushing advantage over any Severing Mundane Tyr Emperor Tyr. Right now, even the King Tyrs in the surroundings were wearing expressions of unease. Even though they weren't being targeted, the overwhelming power of a Dividing Soul Tyr elite still wasn't something that they could withstand. They had no option but to retreat to avoid his aura. Meanwhile, the Emperor Tyrs fared slightly better. However, it wasn't much better. They still had no option but to retreat. There were 5 celestial Tyrs, and each subsequent one would be an insurmountable mountain. Ling Han was going to suffer a miserable fate. Boom! Ran Fei's hand crashed down. Pa! Ling Han replied with a casual slap. He clearly hadn't unleashed any regulations, and his movements clearly weren't very quick. Everyone could see his movements clearly. However, as if under a trance, Ran Fei dazedly stared at this slap cracking across his face. There was a crisp slapping sound as Ran Fei was sent flying back. However, before he could fly far, Ling Han grabbed his calf and forcefully dragged him back. There are so many things you could have learned, yet you insisted on learning such dirty tricks. How did third senior brother teach you? Pa! Ling Han slapped Ran Fei again before saying, You need to respect your seniors. Pa! Even if I'm not your senior, as fellow alchemists, should we not aim to help each other? Pa! With no regard for right or wrong, the first thing you did was accuse me of smearing others. Just who do you think you are? Pa! If it weren't for my strength, wouldn't I need to silently swallow this humiliation? With each point that he raised, Ling Han would slap Ran Fei across the face. Each of these slaps was extremely powerful, and it wasn't long before Ran Fei's entire face became swollen. He looked as ugly as a pig. Pa pa pa! The crisp slapping sounds were incessant, and everyone in the surroundings descended into a state of shock and disbelief. A dividing Solter elite was completely powerless as Ling Han slapped him across the face. This. Just how great was the gulf between their strength? Fifth Severance Monarch Tier. At this moment, no one would doubt Ling Han's strength any longer. Only a Monarch Tier could overcome the gulf of one major tier. Gasp! He was truly a Monarch Tier. Heh, it seems like everyone's having fun, huh? There was a long laugh, after which a young man strode over. Behind him was a stunningly beautiful woman. The two of them appeared relaxed, yet they were radiating with a domineering aura that forced everyone in the surroundings to retreat. Holy Sun Lu! Many people said in a trembling voice. There were expressions of absolute respect and reverence on their faces. This was a supreme prodigy whom they could only gaze up at. The words Fifth Severance Monarch Tier were more than enough to describe his overwhelming strength. Meanwhile, the person beside him was Lu Han, his younger sister. These two siblings were both cultivation prodigies, and they had both become powerful Monarch Tiers. This was a rare feat, even in the history of the celestial realm. Just how much did the heavens adore them to allow both of them to become so extraordinarily outstanding? Friend, can you stop for a moment? Lu Jie said to Ling Han. Even though this was a question, his tone was that of a command. This was only natural. After all, he was a Monarch Tier, so everyone had to obey his words. Who dared to question him? Ling Han glanced at Lu Jie, and an expression of displeasure spread across his face. If Lu Jie had asked in a friendly manner, he wouldn't have insisted on being unreasonable. However, upon arriving, Lu Jie had directly issued a command at him. This instantly caused Ling Han to feel ticked off. He slapped Ran Fei once more before turning around, and saying, I'm disciplining my junior, so do I need you to stick your nose in? Fuck. This person is so audacious. Everyone was stunned upon seeing Ling Han retort Lu Jie. Even though Ling Han had already proven his strength as a Monarch Tier, no one believed that he stood a chance against Lu Jie. This was because there was also a concept of strong and weak among Monarch Tiers. Among the Monarch Tiers from the wide prosperity heaven, Lu Jie was ranked around 20th. Although this was near the bottom, was this not stronger than Ling Han? After all, if Ling Han were more powerful, would he not have become famous already? Ling Han? Lu Jie mused. He wasn't angered. Even in the wide prosperity heaven, there were only around 20 Monarch Tiers in total. Each of them could become a celestial king in the future, and they were the pillars of the wide prosperity heaven. He had learned Ling Han's name by listening to the conversations in the surroundings, and he quietly murmured it to himself. He was certain that he had never heard this name before. I never knew that such a person existed under the branch of Grandmaster Zhu Feng, he said. This was incredible. An alchemist had actually raised a Monarch Tier? Who would believe this? Release him first, Lu Han commanded. There was strong displeasure in her voice. Lu Jie had already commanded him to stop, yet Ling Han was still acting as he pleased. He was far too arrogant. No matter what, this was still the residence of Lu Jie. Thus, by fighting here, just how much did he disrespect Lu Jie? I'm merely disciplining my junior. There's no need for you to worry, Ling Han said. After asking someone, Lu Jie immediately learned of the current situation. He was astonished by what he heard. A monarch tier was actually impersonating an alchemist? He couldn't wrap his head around this. However, if one were to say that Shi Xiuwen and the others were lying, that would be far too preposterous. Did they dare to refute such an important relationship in public? Wouldn't Shi Xiuwen become an unfilial grandson? He pondered for a moment before saying, "We should deal with these matters one by one. Weren't you competing in alchemy? Continue." Once he learned of Ling Han's skill in alchemy, he would be able to largely determine whether he was lying or not. Ling Han smiled and said, "Now this is the way to resolve problems. Then hurry up and release him." Lu Han chimed. Because first impressions were the strongest, she had a very negative view of Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled and said, "My alchemical pill was swapped out by him, so how can we continue if I don't get it back?" "Absolute nonsense!" Ran Fei hurriedly shouted. If he were indicted with this crime in public, he might even be expelled by Zhu Feng. That would be far too cruel. "Is it up to you to say whether this is nonsense or not?" Ling Han said in a cold voice. He was supremely disappointed in this junior's character. "Then is it up to you to say?" Lu Han asked in a menacing voice. She had already endured Ling Han's haughty attitude for a very long time. "It's up to the truth," Ling Han said. It was also at this moment that he retrieved a spatial god tool from Ran Fei's sleeves. He retrieved an alchemical pill from this spatial god tool, and he could naturally tell whether this was the alchemical pill that he had refined or not. Chapter 1946 Our respects to Senior Uncle. Chapter 1946 Our respects to Senior Uncle. Lu Han was infuriated, and she said, "You're retrieving an alchemical pill from him, and you're pretending that you refined it yourself?" "Stupid girl," Ling Han said in disdain. Lu Han raised her brows and questioned, "What did you say?" Her fury was extremely evident. "You didn't hear?" "Stupid girl, stupid girl, stupid girl." Ling Han repeated himself 3 times. Lu Han exploded in anger, and she could barely contain herself from lunging over to bite Ling Han. From her childhood until now, since when had anyone ever called her a stupid girl? Not only was she a prodigy in cultivation, but she was also breathtakingly beautiful. In fact, she was regarded as the second most beautiful woman in the wide prosperity heaven. As such, it was natural for men to stare at her in awe when they saw her. "You blind fool! That's mine! Mine!" Ran Fei hurriedly shouted. If he didn't resist, the truth would quickly be revealed. "Yours?" Ling Han scoffed. "Are you not aware that alchemists have a habit of adding their own symbols into their alchemical pills?" He funneled some origin power into the alchemical pill, causing it to light up. One could faintly discern the word Ling on the alchemical pill. Commotion instantly swept through the crowd of onlookers. This was as clear as could be. This alchemical pill definitely belonged to Ling Han. Otherwise, why would Ran Fei engrave the word Ling on an alchemical pill that he had refined? Perhaps he harbored some deep feelings for Ling Han? Ran Fei was instantly rendered speechless, and his face flushed beet red. It was naturally humiliating to be exposed before so many people. Lu Han was also rendered speechless. As it turned out, Ling Han had truly been wronged. "Perhaps Brother Ran accidentally put the wrong alchemical pill away," Shi Xiuwen said. He casually cleared Ran Fei of any wrongdoing. However, were the onlookers fools? They were all up in arms upon hearing this. Shi Xiuwen was far too shameless. He had been trying so hard to defame Ling Han just then, yet he was now trying to rid himself of any responsibility. They had never come across such a shameless person before. Ling Han couldn't be bothered dealing with these matters at this moment, so he said, "Who else is an alchemist? Please appraise this alchemical pill for me." "Leave it to me," Lu Jia said with a smile. "Although I'm not an alchemist, I do understand alchemy quite well. At the very least, appraising an alchemical pill won't be an issue." Ling Han glanced at him before nodding and saying, "Then I'll leave it to Brother Lu." He handed the alchemical pill over. Lu Jia held it in his hands and carefully examined it for a moment before saying, "This is a jade cloud pill, and among 2-star alchemical pills, it's one of the most difficult to refine. The refinement of this pill has probably reached a high grade. In terms of spirit refinement, it's reached the third refinement. What? Third refinement? Everyone gasped upon hearing this. Even if they didn't understand the difficulty of refining the Jade Cloud pill, they were well aware of what 3 spirit refinements signified. The 4th refinement was the limit of most alchemists, and those who reached the 5th refinement could be referred to as Grand Masters. This person was far too freakish. In the realm of cultivation, he had reached the position of monarch tier. Meanwhile, in the realm of alchemy, he had also reached the 3rd refinement. He was already closing in on the title of Grand Master. Most importantly, Ling Han was still far too young. By reaching the 3rd refinement at such a young age, it was not a pipe dream for him to reach the 5th refinement. Yan Wei was stupefied upon hearing this. His opponent had refined a more difficult alchemical pill than him, and he had also done so to a higher grade than him. In addition to this, he had even completed more spirit refinements than him. This was an absolute pummeling. With a sliver of hope, he asked, "Then what about the quality of the spirit refinements?" All 3 spirit refinements can be regarded as perfect. The 3rd spirit refinement is slightly inferior, though this doesn't affect the overall quality of the alchemical pill, Lu Jie replied. He genuinely wasn't favoring anyone, and he was speaking the absolute truth. Yan Wei was rendered speechless. In fact, even if Ling Han's 3 spirit refinements had only been of ordinary quality, they would have still been superior because of the quantity. This was an absolute advantage. Yan Wei had only been holding on to a sliver of hope, yet this had also been extinguished now. Ling Han snapped his fingers and said, "Mo Shuang, collect the winnings." This was the reason why he had agreed to this competition. Otherwise, there was no way he would have given such a performance before so many people. Mo Shuang started to excitedly collect the winnings. He had truly struck a gold mine this time, even though there were also some fortunate people who had wagered for Ling Han, to whom he had to give a share of the winnings. This caused many people to glare at Ling Han and Mo Shuang in anger. These 2 people had screwed them over very badly. Ling Han was clearly so talented in alchemy, yet he had still pretended to be a noob. He had treated them as sheep for slaughter. However, a loss was a loss, and there was nothing they could say. With their position and status, they certainly couldn't argue about this. "Now, it's time to deal with the next matter," Ling Han said. He looked at Shi Xiuwen, and continued, "You people swapped my alchemical pill out. As your senior, it's my responsibility to discipline you. Otherwise, others will think that the Ziqing branch of alchemists has no rules." He wore a baleful expression as he said this. Ziqing, who was the most renowned alchemist in the Eastern Celestial Realm? It was none other than Grand Master Ziqing. Perhaps Ling Han was Grand Master Ziqing's disciple? Hang on, was Grand Master Zhu Feng also Grand Master Ziqing's disciple? Because Grand Master Zhu Feng had been expelled by Grand Master Ziqing, few people knew about his history. Now that everyone heard Ling Han saying this, they finally discovered the relationship between Grand Master Zhu Feng and Grand Master Ziqing. Zhu Zijuan's expression instantly changed. Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen were of a later generation, so they didn't know about the relationship between Grand Master Zhu Feng and Grand Master Ziqing. However, Zhu Zijuan was well aware of this relationship. Now that Ling Han had mentioned Grand Master Ziqing, it was clear that he also had a deep relationship with him. Absolute nonsense! Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen chided in unison. Ran Fei was extremely fervent, especially since he had been pummeled and humiliated in public by Ling Han. He detested Ling Han to the core. "Oh, really?" Ling Han said calmly. "Then why don't you go and ask Peng Huanyan? I'm curious to see what he'll say. You still want to take advantage of my master?" Ran Fei jumped up and said, "You fucking pa." Before Ran Fei could even finish speaking, he was brutally slapped across the face by Zhu Zijuan. "Shut up!" Zhu Zijuan chided in anger. Ran Fei had no option but to swallow his words. He couldn't help but look at Zhu Zijuan with an aggrieved expression. Why had he suddenly slapped him? Shi Xiuwen was just about to speak, yet he suddenly sensed a familiar aura. He immediately turned around to glance behind him. Not far away, there were two middle-aged men quickly walking over. One was extremely tall, and one was both short and fat. He looked much like a round ball. "Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen," he hurriedly said in greeting after faltering for a brief moment. These two middle-aged men were Ma Yong and Chen Dong. Both of them were disciples of Zhu Feng, and they had more so obtained his true inheritance. However, they were still slightly inferior when compared to Peng Huanyan. In any case, they were both 3-star alchemists. Ma Yong and Chen Dong only nodded in acknowledgement before quickly finding Ling Han from among the crowd. They hurriedly stepped forward and bowed in respect, saying, "Our respects to Fourth Uncle." "Fourth Uncle!" Commotion instantly swept through the crowd of onlookers. At this moment, no one would doubt Ling Han anymore. Ling Han was indeed Zhu Feng's junior brother. Otherwise, it was impossible for both Ma Yong and Chen Dong to go stupid at once. A grim expression spread across Shi Xiuwen and the others' faces. This confirmation of Ling Han's identity was not good news for them. It signified that they would be targeted in the future. They were in for a world of hurt. Chapter 1947. Are you going to yield or not? Chapter 1947. Are you going to yield or not? Who would have imagined that Ling Han was actually telling the truth? He was truly the junior brother of Grandmaster Zhu Feng. This was far too astonishing, and his status was far too illustrious. Apart from celestial kings, everyone had to give some face to Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand and said, "There's no need, you may rise." Only upon hearing this did Ma Yong and Chen Dong straighten their backs. They wore ice-cold expressions as they glanced at Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen. "Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen," the two of them said in trembling voices. Their legs were shaking uncontrollably. "Are you not going to hurry up and piss off?" Ma Yong roared in anger. "Yes. Yes," Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen said with a hurried nod. However, they felt extremely relieved upon hearing this. Behind closed doors, everything could be resolved peacefully. They could easily transform a large matter into a small matter, and a small matter into no matter at all. "Hold up!" Ling Han waved his hand and said, "I still haven't finished speaking, so why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Ma Yong shuffled over and said in a quiet voice, "Uncle, there are so many people here, so it's best that we don't wash the dirty linen in public." Ling Han scoffed and said, "The three of them secretly tried to swap my alchemical pill out for an inferior pill. They've already stooped so low, so how can they be afraid of being punished in public? Don't take things too far," Zhu Zijuan said in a stern voice. Just then, Ling Han had only been targeting Ran Fei, so he had been able to endure that. After all, Ran Fei wasn't an important person to him. Now, however, Ling Han was directly targeting him. He definitely couldn't endure this. Ling Han immediately lashed out. "Pa!" This was a solid slap. "You've been a young master for too long, so you reckon that you can view everyone as inferior to you? You actually dare to hit me?" Zhu Zijuan held his face with his right hand, and there was venom flashing in his eyes. He had been a prodigy from a young age, so he had naturally enjoyed everyone's praise and love. Since when had he ever been slapped before? "I can't hit you," Ling Han asked in a calm voice. "If you weren't third senior brother's grandson, I would kill you, not simply hit you. Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen, you're just going to stand there and watch this person humiliate me?" Zhu Zijuan shouted. There was fury and bitter resentment in his eyes. So what if Ling Han was Zhu Feng's junior brother? He had never heard of him before. Moreover, the person most important to Zhu Feng was his esteemed master, Grandmaster Ziqing. Apart from him, it was his two senior brothers. Zhu Zijuan had never heard his grandfather mention this junior brother before. Meanwhile, with Ling Han's young age, it was clear that Grandmaster Ziqing had only taken him as a disciple recently. He conceded that Ling Han was indeed a prodigy. However, he was only on the same level as himself. Why did Zhu Zijuan have to adopt a lower status? Why did he have to refer to Ling Han as senior uncle? Why did he have to listen to his reprimands, and even be hit in public by him? Had he done anything wrong? No. He had done everything for the sake of the Liu clan's reputation. Someone had dared to impersonate his grandfather's junior brother, so how could he have endured this? As the saying went, those who were unknowing couldn't be guilty. Why was Ling Han so insistent on punishing him? Conflicted expressions spread across Ma Yong's and Chen Dong's face. They had also only just learned that their master had gained such a young junior brother. It was only during noon today that Peng Huanyan had reported the matters pertaining to Ling Han to Xu Feng. As a result, Xu Feng sternly scolded Peng Huanyan for a long while. He then sent the two of them over to invite Ling Han. However, who knew that they would come across such an awkward situation? In their eyes, this was a private matter for their own branch of alchemists. As such, there was no need to create a huge fuss about it in public. Otherwise, they would only be losing face for themselves. Indeed, they were extremely displeased with Ling Han for causing such a huge commotion out of this. However, what could they do? Ling Han was their senior. Before heading over, Xu Feng had reminded them several times to show respect to Ling Han. Thus, they had immediately bowed in utmost respect upon seeing Ling Han. Right now, they could only try to persuade him. "Fourth uncle, perhaps we should do this somewhere else?" Ma Yong suggested. "There's no need," Ling Han said in a resolute voice. "We can deal with things right here. You're nothing but a stupid brat, so what right do you have to become my senior uncle?" Zhu Zijuan said. He was going all out. With how much Xu Feng doted him, he believed that he would only suffer a scolding at most. How could Xu Feng bear to punish him? "Is this for you to question?" Ling Han said as he slapped Zhu Zijuan across the face again. "I'm intent on punishing you, so are you going to yield or not?" Zhu Zijuan straightened his neck and shouted, "No!" His hair was already disorderly, and his expression of calm had already vanished. He appeared as disheveled as could be. "No? Then I'll beat you until you yield." Ling Han raised his hand and slapped Zhu Zijuan again. "Are you going to yield?" "No." "Pa! Are you going to yield?" "No." After each slap, Ling Han would repeat the same question again. It wasn't long before Zhu Zijuan was slapped silly. "Fourth uncle! Fourth uncle!" Ma Yong and Chen Dong exclaimed. They were extremely anxious upon seeing this. However, this was a senior disciplining their junior, and this was as natural as could be. Unless they were willing to be expelled, how could they dare to interfere? In any case, even if they interfered, there was no guarantee that they could stop Ling Han. Even though one of them was at the Yang Soul and one of them was at the Yin Soul, they still might not be able to defeat Ling Han even if they teamed up. Thus, they could only try to persuade him. However, Ling Han's mind was set, and he refused to believe that he couldn't beat this junior into submission. If he didn't discipline Zhu Zijuan properly today, Zhu Zijuan would only stray further and further on this incorrect path. He needed to take responsibility for his third senior brother's grandson, so he naturally wouldn't back down. Of course, this was partly because he was pissed off at Zhu Zijuan as well. This person actually dared to cheat him. Did he look like a pushover? Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder upon seeing this. Most people here couldn't compare to Zhu Zijuan's status. However, Zhu Zijuan was now being slapped before them, and Zhu Feng's two disciples could do absolutely nothing about it. They didn't even dare to stop Ling Han. However, thinking about this carefully, they realized that anyone would be pissed off if their alchemical pill were swapped out for an inferior one. If Ling Han hadn't noticed their ploy, he might have truly been screwed over. Zhu Zijuan only had himself to blame. "Are you going to yield?" Ling Han asked again after slapping Zhu Zijuan for heaven knew how many times. He wasn't simply slapping Zhu Zijuan. In fact, he had even fused some regulations of flames into his slaps, causing the pain to be searing and bone-deep. This was a torturous pain. Zhu Zijuan's willpower was fairly strong, yet he was still rendered confused and disoriented after being slapped several hundred times. His willpower started to weaken, and his only thought was to end this pain as soon as possible. I yield, he murmured. His willpower crumbled, and tears shamefully burst from his eyes. Everyone gasped upon seeing this. Who could believe that a mighty King Tyr and a prodigious alchemist had actually been beaten to the point of tears? They definitely couldn't provoke Ling Han. Just then, they had still wanted to visit Mo Shuang and Ling Han after everything concluded so that they could ask for some of their wager back. After witnessing this, however, they silently rid themselves of this thought. Fuck. They definitely couldn't provoke this person. Otherwise, they would be asking to be humiliated. With a flick, Ling Han casually tossed Shi Xiuwen toward Ma Yong. He then glanced at Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen, and said, Regardless of whether it's cultivation or alchemy, the most important thing is one's intentions. If one's intentions are crooked, they'll only end up ruining the reputation of their master. He didn't say that he would expel Ran Fei or Shi Xiuwen. However, who was he? He was Zhu Feng's junior brother, so Zhu Feng would naturally listen to his opinions. Thus, even if Zhu Feng only mentioned this in passing, what would Peng Huanyan do? Ran Fei and Shi Xiuwen trembled in fright. They felt extremely aggrieved in their minds. Hadn't they done everything for the sake of Peng Huanyan? Why were they going to be expelled for this? No, they had to immediately seek Peng Huanyan. Chapter 1948 I've come from the calm peace heaven. Chapter 1948 I've come from the calm peace heaven. Lu Jia waved at Ling Han and said, Brother Ling, come, sit. Even though the overall level of cultivation in the wide prosperity heaven was higher, there were still only very few monarch tiers. Thus, each of them was worth becoming friends with. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement, and he was accompanied by Lu Jia to the location of the banquet. This was an elegant garden, and it was filled with all kinds of mysterious flowers and peculiar plants. There was also a pond in the middle in which there was a twin lotus that was giving off a refreshing fragrance. From time to time, some carps would also swim to the surface of the pond, and appear in the gaps between the lotus leaves. Ha! This is a heaven fortune lotus! Ling Han exclaimed as he saw the twin lotus. He had already committed all of the celestial medicines in the world to memory, so he immediately recognized this lotus. However, an expression of disappointment quickly spread across his face, and he said, However, its medicinal age is only 1 billion or so years, so it can only qualify as a pseudo-celestial medicine. Heaven fortune lotuses had to grow for at least 5 billion years before they could absorb enough regulations of heaven and earth and become celestial medicines. If they hadn't passed this age, they could only be considered as pseudo-celestial medicines. Of course, pseudo-celestial medicines were already incredibly valuable. Each of them could sell for an astronomical amount of star stones. However, few people would be willing to sell their celestial medicines for star stones. Generally speaking, people would trade them for other valuable materials or celestial medicines, or perhaps some high-level celestial techniques. Lu Jia had initially been wearing a proud smile. Generally speaking, only celestial kings had the right to plant and nurture celestial medicines. Yet he already possessed one while still at the severing mundane tier. Just how astonishing was this? However, Ling Han's next remark made it seem as if he didn't think much about this pseudo-celestial medicine. This caused him to feel extremely vexed. Lu Han instantly held her hand to her mouth and chuckled. She had initially viewed Ling Han in a very bad light. However, he had proved that he was a mighty monarch tier. Monarch tiers were naturally proud people. Moreover, Ling Han was not only a cultivation prodigy, but he also possessed incredible talent in alchemy. Thus, she naturally viewed him with increased respect. When viewing someone else, if one possessed a mindset of dislike, they would definitely see that person as more and more dislikable. Even if that person spoke beautiful words, one would feel that they were trying to please others with claptrap. However, once this impression was fixed, they would see that person in a completely different light. The latter would seem to be more and more likable. Otherwise, Lu Han definitely wouldn't have chuckled upon hearing Ling Han's words. Instead, she would have thought that he was putting on airs. Brother Ling, your standards are truly so high, Lu Jia said with a shake of his head. He was clearly very speechless. Everyone sat down, and there were naturally servants bustling about to serve them with dish after dish of delicacies. A holy sun was hosting guests, so the quality of this banquet naturally wouldn't be low. The meat was celestial beast meat, and the wine was celestial medicine wine. Of course, the celestial beasts were only at the third or fourth severance, and the celestial wines only possessed a single leaf from celestial medicines. With how valuable celestial medicines were, they naturally couldn't add too much of it. Even so, everyone was still filled with delight as they enjoyed this sumptuous meal. If it weren't for embarrassment, they truly would shout for another serving. Liu Jia didn't speak during the meal, and only when everyone was almost finished eating did he say, "I invited everyone over for a very important matter." "Dare I ask, Holy Son, what is this important matter?" someone naturally asked. Liu Jia pondered for a moment before saying, "A mystery realm of heaven and earth has appeared on the border between the calm peace heaven and our wide prosperity heaven. Inside this mystery realm is a source power of heaven and earth." "What? Source power of heaven and earth?" This instantly captured everyone's attention, and they all wore expressions of emotion and eagerness. Source powers of heaven and earth were of the celestial king tier. Upon obtaining one could be regarded as invincible among their own cultivation level. If they, the king tiers and emperor tiers, obtained one, their battle prowess would also elevate by an entire level. Perhaps king tiers would become emperor tiers, and perhaps emperor tiers would become monarch tiers. This source power of heaven and earth is called the fiery flame lightning strike wood. However, not only has our wide prosperity heaven received this news, but the calm peace heaven has also received this news. A celestial king has deduced that this mystery realm of heaven and earth will open in about 1 year from now. Meanwhile, the fiery flame lightning strike wood will also finish maturing at about the same time. It will become a genuine source power of heaven and earth, and it will be ready for harvest. However, only those at the severing mundane tier will be able to enter the mystery realm of heaven and earth. At that time, the severing mundane tier cultivators from the two heavens will definitely engage in an intense competition. Upon hearing this, many people wore expressions of disdain. The calm peace heaven? Are they worthy of competing with us? I've heard that the calm peace heaven doesn't even have a single monarch tier. Any random monarch tier from our heaven can completely obliterate them. That's right. At most, they'll only be heading over to enjoy the atmosphere. Only the monarch tiers from our wide prosperity heaven will be true competitors for this source power. In the recent several 100 million years, the wide prosperity heaven had suddenly experienced rapid growth. Not only did it shake off the title of weakest, but it even pulled further and further ahead of the calm peace heaven. It was showing signs of entering the low mid-quartile. Thus, the younger generation of the wide prosperity heaven was extremely proud and haughty. They believed that the calm peace heaven would only have a few king tiers at most. Ling Han stroked his chin and said, "Sorry, but I'm from the calm peace heaven." His words instantly rendered everyone speechless. How was this possible? A prodigy such as Ling Han was actually nurtured by the calm peace heaven? "Brother Ling, you're so good at telling jokes." "That's right. A prodigy such as Brother Ling is definitely the pride of our wide prosperity heaven." Many people immediately expressed their doubt. They all shook their heads. Ling Han couldn't be bothered refuting them, and he simply replied with a smile. Liu Jia hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No matter what, since our Universal Cloud sect is aware of this matter, we naturally have to give it our all to fight for the fiery flame lightning strike wood. The Holy Sun is right. We definitely have to win this source power of heaven and earth for Guanhua City." Many people shouted. Regardless of whether this was possible or not, they would naturally have to sing praises to the Holy Sun first. Liu Jia nodded and continued, "Source powers of heaven and earth won't necessarily follow one just because they're powerful. Source powers are celestial king tier existences, so they naturally have their own requirements when seeking a master. Thus, our goal is to arrive before the source power of heaven and earth so that we can be considered by it. We only have one opportunity. If a source power of heaven and earth can't find a suitable master upon birth, it will escape through heaven and earth, and vanish from this heaven. At that time, only a celestial king will be able to capture it. Thus, failure will signify that we have to wait for countless more years until a second opportunity appears. In the beginning, I planned on inviting 5 people to form a 7-star dazzling moon formation with my younger sister and me. That way, we could increase our battle prowess. However, since Brother Ling has come, I believe that the 3 of us will be more than powerful enough to overcome any challenge. With a team of 3 monarch tiers, what challenges couldn't they overcome? Ling Han felt slightly apologetic, and he said, I'm genuinely from the calm peace heaven, so I can only politely turn down Brother Lu's kind proposal. Ha ha! Ling Han's words instantly elicited loud laughter from many people. They felt that Ling Han was hilarious. Ling Han was truly rendered speechless. Why did no one ever believe him when he spoke the truth? Brother Ling, you genuinely don't want to team up with us? Lu Jia asked with a serious expression. If it were just him and Lu Han, they wouldn't have much confidence in overcoming their competition. After all, the top 3 monarch tiers in the wide prosperity heaven were extremely freakish. Only with a team of 3 monarch tiers did he have enough confidence to rival the top monarch tiers in the wide prosperity heaven. However, this was simply rivaling, not defeating. Ling Han shook his head and said, I've already stated my reason very clearly. Lu Jia was also doubtful about Ling Han's claim that he was from the calm peace heaven. After all, he held a deep-rooted belief that the calm peace heaven was an extremely weak heaven. Thus, he tried to persuade Ling Han again, saying, Brother Ling, if you're afraid that we might conflict and develop animosity over the fiery flame lightning strike wood, then there's truly no need to worry. I've already said, the source power of heaven and earth will choose its own master, so we're simply fighting for an opportunity to arrive before this precious treasure so that we can be considered by it. His voice was filled with sincerity. Chapter 1949 Counterfeit. Chapter 1949 Counterfeit. However, it was useless regardless of how sincere Lu Jia was. This was because Ling Han was truly from the calm peace heaven. In fact, in Ling Han's view, it was completely pointless to group people according to the wide prosperity heaven or the calm peace heaven. After all, the source power of heaven and earth would actively choose its own master. That being the case, why didn't everyone cooperate to arrive before the fiery flame lightning strike would? Wouldn't that be a better option? In any case, it would be useless regardless of how much they competed. However, it was a shame that no one would accept this proposal. This was a valuable treasure, so they naturally had to fight over it. Those who were powerful would make the rules. Lu Jia felt that this was a shame. However, Ling Han was insistent on rejecting his proposal, and he even persisted with the excuse of being from the calm peace heaven. This caused him to feel displeased and impatient, so he gave up on trying to persuade Ling Han any further. According to his original plan, he had to pick 5 Emperor tiers to team up with Lu Han and him. That way, they could form the 7-star dazzling moon formation. This formation would most likely be strong enough to rival the top monarch tiers of the wide prosperity heaven. After picking 5 Emperor tiers, the banquet continued, and the conversation moved away from cultivation. Meanwhile, Lu Han became more and more interested in Ling Han. There were few female monarch tiers, yet monarch tiers all had extremely high standards. They definitely wouldn't be willing to marry a man inferior to them. Thus, they would only have a very, very small pool of people to choose from. With her impression of Ling Han changed, Lu Han naturally felt that he was more and more likable. She wanted to become an intimate friend with him. Of course, being an intimate friend and lovers were 2 completely different matters. However, for a monarch tier such as herself, her lover would definitely have to begin as an intimate friend. Celestial Maiden Lu Han, I've heard that one can only have the right to chase after you if they defeat you. Someone asked as they saw Lu Han exchanging whispers with Ling Han. They were feeling extremely jealous. In any case, Lu Han had said this herself. If one couldn't defeat her, then they wouldn't have the right to chase after her. Thus, if Ling Han wanted to chase after Lu Han, he would need to defeat her first, no? A look of displeasure spread across Lu Han's face. Why was this person so annoying? At the same cultivation level, Only few people in the world can defeat Celestial Maiden Liu. No wonder Celestial Maiden Liu is still single even though she's so stunningly beautiful. Many people were feeling extremely jealous, and they all spoke before Lu Han could say anything. They were intent on keeping Ling Han and Lu Han apart. Ling Han simply smiled and continued to drink wine. He had only been speaking to Lu Han because she had been asking him about celestial techniques. He had also become interested, so he exchanged a few more words with Lu Han. He had no other thoughts. These people. Couldn't their minds be purer? Lu Han's expression darkened, and she suddenly blinked before revealing a beautiful smile. She turned to Ling Han and said, "Brother Ling, why don't you have a spar with me?" Ling Han rubbed his nose. He wasn't underestimating Lu Han, but with his current strength, Lu Han most likely didn't have the right to spar with him. This wouldn't be an equal battle, but instead a question of how many strikes she could block. "Ugly sh*t, I'll spar with you," someone suddenly said. Ling Han looked over, only to see a youth striding over. He looked to be around 17 or 18, and he was as handsome as could be. Ling Han had seen many handsome people before, yet the sum of them wasn't even 1/10 as handsome as this person. Moreover, this young man looked extremely androgynous. If he changed into female clothes, he would definitely become a stunning beauty who could intoxicate many people. Coincidentally, Ling Han had seen this person in female clothes before. This was no handsome young man. Instead, it was Hu Neo in disguise. With the skills of Celestials, hiding one's Adam's apple and shrinking one's breasts was as easy as could be. If they wanted to disguise themselves, it would definitely be hard to see through them. Of course, this was unless one could examine them with origin power. At that time, they would be unable to conceal the true structure of their body. Ugly sh*t? At least half of the people became enraged upon hearing this. This person actually dared to call Lu Han ugly sh*t? Didn't he know that she was the second most beautiful woman in the entire wide prosperity heaven? Only Shi Xiuwen, the holy daughter of the Black Flame sect, could suppress her in terms of beauty. If Lu Han was ugly sh*t, then would there still be any beautiful women in the world? However, upon seeing Hu Neo, this young man was truly as handsome as could be. Although men and women couldn't be compared, everyone reached the same conclusion when glancing between Hu Neo and Lu Han. That was, Hu Neo was far prettier than Lu Han. Lu Han furrowed her brows in anger. This person actually dared to call her ugly sh*t before Ling Han? She clenched her fists in anger. However, upon seeing Hu Neo, her heart couldn't help but flutter. She became slightly flustered and intoxicated. Both Hu Neo and the Empress were paramount beauties who could intoxicate the entire world. When disguised as men, they could similarly intoxicate all women. Lu Han's anger instantly vanished into thin air. Her heart thumped in her chest, and she could even feel a warm blush spreading across her face. She had never believed in love at first sight. She more so didn't view herself as someone who was attracted by outward appearances. Upon seeing Hu Neo, however, she couldn't stop her heart from fluttering. Regarding Ling Han, she only felt some slight admiration. Facing this young man, however, she truly loved him to death. She nodded and said, "Fine, let's spar." She gracefully walked over. Hu Neo glared at this. Ugly sh*t. She actually dared to seduce her Ling Han. She would definitely smash her into pieces so that she could never seduce Ling Han again. Xiu! The two of them leaped into the air, standing 300 meters away from each other. The more Lu Han looked at Hu Neo, the more her body became limp and heated. This young man didn't appear mighty and strong. However, he was far too handsome. His eyes were extremely lively, and it was as if they could speak. Her heart fluttered and thumped against her chest. She decided that she would definitely let Hu Neo win, regardless of how strong or weak he was. She had uttered those words herself, so she definitely had to abide by them. However, who said that she couldn't lose on purpose? However, her expression instantly changed when she saw Hu Neo attack. So powerful! This wasn't a king tier or an emperor tier, but rather a monarch tear. Not only was she astonished, but everyone else was also stupefied. Monarch tears were like lone stars above the highest of heavens. They were extremely few in number. Now, however, Ling Han had suddenly popped up, and now it was this handsome young man. Just what in the world was going on? Had monarch tears become worthless? Even though the fortune of heaven and earth had undergone a transformation in the wide prosperity heaven, leading to a sharp rise in the number of prodigies, it still hadn't reached such an incredible stage, right? Lu Han hurriedly unleashed her full power to battle against Hunyo. However, she immediately became flustered, and she fell into an absolute disadvantage. It was clear that Lu Han wasn't going easy on Hunyo. However, Hunyo was far too powerful. A pair of rock wings unfurled from her back, allowing her movements to be quicker than lightning. Meanwhile, there were large fish symbols on her arms, and these fish even had a single horn on their heads. They felt even nobler than divine dragons. Source beast! Rock! Someone exclaimed in astonishment. No wonder this young man was so indescribably powerful. As it turned out, he possessed the bloodline of the rock, a king-tier source beast. In other words, he had practiced the celestial king techniques of the rock. According to rumors, king-tier celestial beasts were at least at the 8th heaven. More heaven-defying ones could even reach the 9th heaven and peer down on the entire celestial realm. Hunyo became engrossed in the fight, and with a long cry, the projection of a large fish materialized behind her body. However, it had a pair of rock wings, and it was radiating with an aura of primordial nature. She was like a paramount being from the primordial ages, and it was as if she could suppress all matter from past to present. Boom! With a shudder, Lu Han was immediately sent flying. Her beautiful face became pale, and her hair also became slightly disheveled. A monarch tear was easily defeated just like that. Chapter 1950 Love at First Sight. Chapter 1950 Love at First Sight. Lu Han endured the boiling pain in her chest and said, "I've lost." She accepted this result wholeheartedly. Hunyo felt extremely smug, and she said, "Ugly sh*t, you're mine in the future. You're not allowed to seduce any other men, do you understand?" She suddenly realized that just beating Lu Han up wasn't enough. After all, dying cinders might glow again, so this wasn't a comprehensive approach. However, what if Lu Han fell in love with a non-existent person? At that time, this ugly sh*t wouldn't try to seduce Ling Han anymore. She was truly very smart. A blush spread across Lu Han's face. By saying this, was he announcing his ownership over her? Just look, he was already becoming jealous, and not wanting her to have any relationships with other men. His jealousy was astonishing, yet she also felt that it was incredibly adorable. Her entire body became soft and limp. She lowered her head and nodded in obedience. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. He had won over the second most beautiful woman in the wide prosperity heaven just like that. Holy fuck! Ling Han more so didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. He hadn't imagined that Hunyo would ignore his words and not stay at home. Not only that, but she had actually disguised as a man to capture the hearts of beautiful women. "Friend, how should I refer to you?" Lu Jia asked with a smile. However, his mind was filled with shock. Another monarch tear had suddenly appeared. Moreover, he hadn't received any information about them beforehand. This left him extremely astonished. Not only that, but this young man was also frighteningly powerful. He had defeated Lu Han in just a few strikes, and this reminded him of the freaks in the wide prosperity heaven. Hunyo shot a sideways glance at him before placing her hands on her hips, and saying, "What are you interested in, yo?" Fuck. Everyone was drenched in sweat upon hearing this. This demeanor, this tone. Which part of him seemed like a man? He was clearly like a mischievous young girl. Lu Jia involuntarily frowned and said, "Friend, are you a man or a woman? What's it to you?" Hunyo glared at him and said, "I'm warning you, don't have any indecent thoughts." Lu Jia's frown became even deeper and he said, "Since you're a woman, why are you playing such a prank? Brother, what nonsense are you speaking? Lu Han immediately chided. Her face was filled with anger, and she said, How can he be a woman? Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. Had she gone blind? It was as clear as day that she was a female. Yet she was still deeply attracted to her. Little sister, wake up! Look carefully. Which part of her seems like a man? Lu Jie said in a frantic voice. Lu Han glanced at Hu Niu, and she only felt like his handsomeness was making her heart flutter. Although he was slightly feminine, this was because of his androgynous nature. How was he a woman? These men were simply jealous. Just look at them. Which one of them was even 1/10 as handsome as this handsome young man? Hu Niu became even more smug, and she said, Girl, you're mine in the future. Ling Han shook his head, and said, Hu Niu, enough with the nonsense. Hu Niu didn't so much as glance at him, and she shouted, Hu Niu! Who's Hu Niu? Don't utter such nonsense! Everyone facepalmed upon hearing this. She had just been referring to herself as Niu just then, so Hu Niu was almost certainly her name. Her futile denial was far too obvious. Come on, don't misbehave, Ling Han said in a gentle voice. He had a habit of treating Hu Niu like a mischievous glutton. However, Hu Niu was extremely determined this time. If she saw someone as a threat, she would immediately rush over to capture their hearts first. That way, Ling Han would be safe. As expected of Niu, she was far too smart. She continued to ignore Ling Han, and she gestured for Lu Han to come over. The stunning beauty was extremely shy as she walked over. The two of them walked side by side, with one of them breathtakingly handsome and one of them as beautiful as a flower. At a glance, they were like a match made in heaven. Brother Ling, is this person your friend? Lu Jie asked. Ling Han rubbed his nose and nodded in confirmation. He was speechless at Hu Niu's actions. Brother Ling, only you can resolve this situation, Lu Jie said. He was extremely good at offloading responsibility, and he directly kicked the ball into Ling Han's court. The banquet continued, yet no one's mind was on proper matters anymore. They were all glancing at Hu Niu and Lu Han. One was wearing an expression of impatience, while the other was wearing an expression of shyness. There was also an expression of love and fondness in the latter's eyes, and it was clear that she had fallen deeply in love. Love at first sight was truly a dangerous matter. Mo Shuang shuffled over with a gossipy expression and asked, Brother Ling, is that your wife? Ling Han glanced at him and didn't reply. Then what should I do? Mo Shuang asked with a pained expression. Not long ago, Ling Han had still said that he would help him pick up some girls. Now, however, Ling Han's own woman had picked up some girls. Just what in the world was this? Just forget about it, Ling Han replied. Hu Niu was determined to see this through, so there was nothing he could do about it either. However, we still reaped great rewards today, Mo Shuang said with an excited expression. After all, Lu Han only represented an impossible dream. He also knew that it was impossible for him to win her over, so he didn't feel disappointed for too long. How much did we make? Ling Han asked. His eyes also lit up. In terms of starstones alone, we made almost 7 million. In addition to this, we also obtained a large amount of pseudo-divine metal and a large number of alchemical pills. In total, they're worth more than 20 million. Mo Shuang replied in a quiet voice. Technically speaking, 20 million wasn't a huge amount for ascending origin tier forces. However, 2 measly severing mundane tier cultivators earning so much in a single day. This was an astounding number. Even though Mo Shuang had experienced many grand things before, he still couldn't help but be beside himself with excitement. Ling Han nodded and said, We'll split it 50-50. How can we do that? Mo Shuang hurriedly shook his head and said, Brother Ling, are you looking down on me? I essentially did nothing, and it was all thanks to Brother Ling's astounding alchemical talent that we earned so much. I can only take 30% at most. Fine, Ling Han said. He didn't insist on his original proposal. However, Mo Shuang had done much more than he gave himself credit for. If it weren't for his status as the seventh of the Mo clan, who would have proposed a gamble with Ling Han? Thus, giving him 30% wasn't much. When the banquet concluded, Ling Han followed Shindong and Ma Yong to visit Zhu Feng. Using a transfer formation, they covered countless kilometers and arrived beneath a towering mountain. This mountain was like an azure mountain from the paintings, with limpid waters flowing in its midst. The surrounding scenery was breathtakingly beautiful. They ventured along the mountain path, and it wasn't long before they arrived in front of a large courtyard. Ling Han immediately hummed in surprise. This was because this courtyard looked far too similar to alchemist Xi Cheng's residence. After entering, this feeling only became stronger. Even without Ma Yong and Shindong's guidance, Ling Han could have definitely located the alchemy room, the main hall, the left and right garden, and the medicine garden. By the looks of it, this third senior brother still hadn't walked out from Grandmaster Xi Cheng's shadows. Even the layout of his residence was heavily influenced by that of Grandmaster Xi Cheng's. Of course, this could also be viewed as Zhu Feng reminiscing the past. Perhaps he couldn't forget his experiences with Grandmaster Xi Cheng. It wasn't long before the three of them arrived at the guest hall. Ling Han looked over, only to see a middle-aged man sitting on the central seat. His eyebrows were thick, and his eyes were large. However, his hair was already all white. This appeared extremely conflicting with the rest of his features. The middle-aged man laughed heartily upon seeing Ling Han, and said, "Junior brother!" With a single glance, Ling Han could already tell that this was Zhu Feng. It was clear that he wasn't an impostor. Genuine grandmasters would all possess an indescribable aura. The greater their skill in alchemy, the more obvious this aura would become. Ling Han also wore a wide smile as he strode over, and said, "Third senior brother!" When he arrived before Zhu Feng, he bowed deeply, and said, "Ling Han pays respects to third senior brother." "No need for such formalities," Zhu Feng said as he helped Ling Han up. He didn't wait for Ling Han to bow even further. "I received Master's message saying that he accepted a new junior brother for the three of us just then. I was still thinking what this third junior brother looked like. Now I finally have the chance to see you today." He turned around and said, "Shi Xiuwen, are you not going to kneel and apologize to your senior uncle?" Chapter 1951 Punishment. Chapter 1951 Punishment. There were two other people in the hall. One was Shi Xiuwen, and the other was Peng Huanyan. Shi Xiuwen's expression immediately changed upon hearing this, and he said in stubbornness, "Grandpa, I didn't do anything wrong." Zhu Feng flared up in rage and he roared, "Brat, you disrespected your senior, yet you're still saying that you did no wrong?" Shi Xiuwen gritted his teeth and said, "But my original intent wasn't wrong. I was just furious that someone dared to impersonate Grandpa's junior brother. Those who are unknowing can't be guilty, so I don't think that I did anything wrong." "Oh? Then did I also teach you to steal and swap out other people's alchemical pills? Did I teach you to cheat others?" Zhu Feng asked. Even his hair was billowing in fury, and his gaze was as intense as could be. He was an ascending origin tier elite, so Shi Xiuwen naturally couldn't withstand his might. With a thud, he had already fallen to his knees. He couldn't help but tremble. Ling Han didn't persuade Zhu Feng to stop. After all, regardless of how talented Shi Xiuwen was in alchemy, if his personality wasn't set straight, things would never change. If he practiced cultivation, he would only end up hurting others. If he practiced alchemy, he would only end up aiding evil forces. Neither of these was a good result. If Shi Xiuwen had been Ling Han's disciple or future generation disciple, he would have already expelled him for good. However, Zhu Feng was only his senior brother in name, so he naturally couldn't extend his reach too far. Shi Xiuwen went extremely pale. He could make excuses for everything else, but he naturally couldn't make any excuse for swapping Ling Han's pill out. He had ordered this, and Ran Fei and Shi Yong had already made a confession. He didn't even have the chance to find a sacrificial lamb. "From a young age, you already displayed extreme talent in alchemy. By the looks of it, my hopes in you were too high, and I ended up forgetting to teach you how to be a proper person, Xu Feng said with a shake of his head. He wore a pained expression on his face. He paused for a brief moment before continuing. As punishment, I forbid you from using the Zhu surname for 100 million years. Moreover, you're not allowed to mention that you're an alchemist from the Ziqing branch. You can travel the world as an ordinary person. Grandpa! Zhu Zijian shouted. He almost jumped up upon hearing this. He was the most brilliant descendant of the Zhu clan, yet he was actually being sent into exile now. How could he accept this? Xu Feng's gaze became sharp, and he said in a baleful voice, Perhaps you want me to cripple your cultivation and banish you from the Zhu clan forever? Zhu Zijian's face became as white as a sheet. He knew that his grandfather had already made up his mind. He could only slowly make his way up from the bottom again. He started to leave the hall, and each of his steps was extremely heavy. It was as if his legs had been filled with lead. He looked much like an old and ailing candle guttering in the wind. He was filled with disappointment and dejection. Xu Feng's heart softened, and he almost called out to retract his command. In the end, however, he kept his lips tightly shut. Ling Han saw this, and he could only sigh in his mind. It looked like Xu Feng was punishing Zhu Zijian, but he was more so giving Zhu Zijian some challenges through which he could improve himself. Zhu Zijian was already talented enough in alchemy. However, alchemy required more than just one's hands. It also required one's mind and heart. He hoped that Zhu Zijian could understand his grandfather's earnest care. If he could comprehend this within 100 million years, his future would definitely be bright and limitless. Otherwise, a petty and narrow-minded person couldn't walk far in either cultivation or alchemy. On the side, Peng Huanyan was also trembling slightly. Even Zhu Zijian, Xu Feng's grandson, had suffered such severe punishment. Thus, as he was a disciple, his situation was even more perilous. Huanyan. Sure enough, Xu Feng glanced over after dealing with Zhu Zijian. Peng Huanyan hurriedly shuffled over, and said with utmost respect, Master, you've also disappointed me greatly, Xu Feng said with a shake of his head. Peng Huanyan fell to his knees in fright, and said, This disciple acknowledges his wrongdoings. Master, please give me an opportunity to reform myself. What did you do wrong? Xu Feng asked. Peng Huanyan pondered for a moment before answering. I was too arrogant and haughty before, and I viewed everyone else with contempt because I was a 3-star alchemist and also the disciple of a grand master. I got too far ahead of myself. Xu Feng nodded and said, What hurts me most is that not only were you wildly arrogant, but even your disciples were the same. This is a clear reflection of just how haughty and arrogant you've become. Peng Huanyan kowtowed and said, I understand my mistakes. You can leave now. As your punishment, refine 1,000 cauldrons of alchemical pills. During this time, you're not allowed to take a single step out of this place. I hope you can focus all of your attention on alchemy. Xu Feng said. This disciple understands, Peng Huanyan said. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even though refining 1,000 cauldrons of alchemical pills would take an exorbitant amount of time, at the very least, he hadn't been expelled. This allowed him to breathe a huge sigh of relief. Xu Feng waved his hand to dismiss Peng Huanyan. He then turned to Ling Han and said, Sorry for making you witness this embarrassment. No, don't say that. Third senior brother has focused all of his attention on alchemy, so it's difficult to avoid such situations, Ling Han said. Xu Feng laughed and said, Let's not talk about these depressing matters. Is Master still doing well? He's doing amazing. He's raking in money every day, and even his hands are starting to cramp from counting money, Ling Han said with a chuckle. Xu Feng couldn't help but grin upon hearing this. Grandmaster Ziqing was good at everything, yet he was far too attracted to money. No matter what it was, he would always try to think of a way to make money with it. The two of them chit-chat for a moment before Ling Han took his leave. Because he had already become accustomed to living at the Mo clan, he politely declined Xu Feng's offer to stay at his place. In any case, Xu Feng's grand celebration was in 3 days, so he would leave for the Three Blooms Valley after this celebration concluded. Upon arriving at the Liu Clan, Liu Clan had already collected all of Ling Han's winnings for him. He had placed them into several spatial god tools, and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was currently checking over them in delight. She was much like a female housekeeper. Ling Han couldn't see Hu Niu anywhere, so he couldn't help but ask, "Huh? Where's Hu Niu? Don't mention it." When she returned earlier, there was even a woman following behind her, insisting that Hu Niu head over to propose marriage. As a result, Hu Niu ran off again. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden said with a strange expression, "Say, were women this open nowadays? They were even willing to marry other women?" Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. He then shook his head. He hadn't imagined that Lu Han would be so deeply intoxicated by Hu Niu. She wasn't even suspecting Hu Niu's gender? Night fell, and Hu Niu finally returned. "So how did you deal with her?" Ling Han asked with a chuckle. Hu Niu pouted and said, "That was no fun at all. I'm definitely not doing that again in the future." She had initially thought that Lu Han would stop pestering Ling Han if she captured the other's heart first. In the end, however, she had become the one being pestered. It would be far easier to simply shoo them away from Ling Han. "You told her that you're female?" Hu Niu nodded and said, "I told her." Ling Han also nodded. Since Hu Niu had personally admitted to being a woman, Lu Han would most likely put this awkward episode of misplaced love behind her. Even though Lu Han would be angry and embarrassed for a while, this was still far better than continuing with the misplaced love. In the following few days, Ling Han kept an extremely low profile. After all, there was no one else for him to screw over. He exchanged all of his starstones for level 20 godly metal, yet this still wasn't enough to raise his divine demon sword to the 4th star. It was still a sliver away from reaching this level. The day for Zhu Feng's grand celebration finally arrived. There was a sea of guests, and even ascending origin tier forces had dispatched their grand elders to congratulate Zhu Feng. In fact, even the Universal Cloud's Celestial King had specially sent Lu Jia over to represent him in congratulating Zhu Feng. Ling Han brought the Empress, Hu Niu, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and Bewitching Maiden Row over. With a handsome man and 3 beautiful women, they were naturally very eye-catching. However, on a day like this, even profligate and haughty people didn't dare to cause any trouble. At the most, they would only steal a few extra glances. "Is this Uncle Ling?" someone suddenly asked in a sarcastic voice. Ling Han looked over, only to see a young man walking over. As this young man gazed at him, an expression of ridicule spread across his face. Chapter 1952 Asking for Advice. Chapter 1952 Asking for Advice. Ling Han simply glanced at him, and didn't say anything. This was his way of showing disdain. He couldn't even be bothered replying. The young man was angered. He raised his voice, and sarcastically said, "I'm Liu Xing, the 9th disciple of Xiao Lixing, Grand Master Xiao. My respects to 4th Uncle." "4th Uncle, you're not so arrogant that you'll ignore your own juniors, right?" Xiao Lixing was the 2nd disciple of Grand Master Ziqing. At that time, he had left for the distant dispelling cloud heaven, and right now, he had already become a renowned Grand Master there. He had been invited as an esteemed guest to the return to Origin Palace, and his status was now extremely transcendent. Thus, this Liu Xing was naturally Ling Han's junior nephew. The 3 disciples of Grandmaster Ziqing had always enjoyed a close relationship, so their disciples would also frequently mingle with each other. Because Liu Xing was close in age to Shi Xiuwen, and because their personalities were similar, they had naturally become very good friends. They weren't distant with each other because of their difference in seniority. Liu Xing had come here representing Xiao Lixing to congratulate Shi Xiuwen. Because he had been caught up with some matters while traveling here, he had only arrived during dawn today. He had initially wanted to seek Shi Xiuwen to chit-chat and pick up girls, yet he discovered that Shi Xiuwen had already left Guanhua City. This had astonished him greatly. Even if Shi Xiuwen needed to leave, he should have done so after the conclusion of the celebration, right? Only afterward did he learn of the reason why. As it turned out, Shi Xiuwen hadn't wanted to leave himself. Instead, he had been forced away by someone. The perpetrator in question was none other than Ling Han, his new and unexpected fourth uncle. Just who in the world was this person? A stupid brat wanted to become his senior uncle? Liu Xing was a prodigy in cultivation, so even though he was still young, he was still referred to as uncle, senior uncle, or even ancestral uncle by many older alchemists. This was something that he had always been proud of and smug about. However, who would have thought that he would one day need to refer to a younger person as fourth uncle? He was extremely displeased about this. Moreover, he was also feeling extremely angry for his friend. Thus, Liu Xing especially walked over to obstruct Ling Han. As a junior, he naturally didn't dare to curse and slander Ling Han. However, he naturally had other methods to humiliate him. Upon hearing this, Ling Han took an extra glance at Liu Xing and said, "No need for such formalities." "Fuck. I never paid my respects to you at all." "What do you mean no need for such formalities?" Liu Xing gasped in his mind. No wonder Shi Xiuwen had been forced to leave by him. Just look at Ling Han. His tongue was already so toxic, so his heart was definitely rotten to the core. Fourth uncle is truly successful for his young age. By the looks of it, fourth uncle is no older than 100,000 years old, am I right? An artificial smile spread across his face as he purposefully flattered Ling Han. The more he flattered Ling Han, the more painful his fall from grace would be. According to the normal flow of time, Ling Han was only around 200 years old. Cultivating under the reincarnation tree wouldn't age his physical body. However, after entering the time cultivation chambers, the Black Tower could also accelerate time by 1,000-fold. Thus, his true age right now was already in excess of 10,000 years. This was reflected in his flame of life. Although it was still raging and extremely lively, one could still discern the marks left by time. Of course, in the celestial realm, 10,000 years was nothing more than the blink of an eye. The age of elites was often calculated in tens of billions of years or even hundreds of billions of years. Hu Niu glared at Liu Xing and said, "Your smile is so fake. I urge you to stop smiling. Otherwise, Niu will smash you into smithereens." She still maintained her innocent nature, and she was as naive and innocent as a child. Of course, this was apart from wanting to have children with Ling Han. Thus, she would directly speak her mind whenever she came across something that she didn't like. She wouldn't hide her emotions, and she more so wouldn't feign politeness. Liu Xing involuntarily faltered upon hearing this. Hu Niu's aura was far too overwhelming, and just her glare alone was enough to make his hair stand on ends. He almost wet his pants in fright. He was a prodigy in alchemy, but he didn't have any talent in cultivation. He wasn't even a king tier. Thus, how could he possibly withstand Hu Niu's aura? After regaining his composure, he purposefully raised his voice and said, "I've admired fourth uncle for a long time, so I want to seek some advice from fourth uncle regarding some difficult problems in alchemy." Since they were conversing in a corner, others wouldn't have noticed them before. However, by raising his voice, Liu Xing instantly attracted the attention of many people. Xu Feng was a 4-star grandmaster. Although the holy land of alchemy in the eastern celestial realm was Alchemy City, this didn't imply that there weren't alchemists in other places. On the contrary, each place would have its own alchemists. It was just that 99% of these alchemists belonged to Alchemy City. Only very few of them were independent. For example, Xu Feng resided in Guanhua City. First of all, he could receive protection from the Universal Cloud's Celestial King. Second of all, it was comparatively easier to obtain celestial medicines in a Celestial King tier force. Thus, this kind of celebration was more enticing to alchemists. In the eyes of alchemists, advancing from the 5th refinement to the 6th refinement was a glorious achievement to be worshipped. Anyhow, who was Liu Xing? Many people recognized him. He was an outstanding disciple of Shaolixing. Even though he hadn't practiced alchemy for many years, he had already advanced to become a 2-star alchemist. He had more so reached the 3rd spirit refinement, so he definitely had a huge chance to become an alchemy grandmaster in the future. Even Liu Xing had to refer to this person as uncle, so didn't this imply that he was a 4-star grandmaster? They definitely had to seize this opportunity to admire this grandmaster. However, when they looked over, they didn't see anyone who looked like a grandmaster. Apart from Liu Xing, there was another young man as well as 4 young women. Apart from being handsome and beautiful, either of them looked like a 4-star grandmaster. However, those 4 women were truly very beautiful. Their beauty was about to melt everyone's heart. Right now, Liu Xing was looking at that young man. Gasp! That young man is actually Liu Xing's senior uncle? Is that even possible? Ling Han gazed at Liu Xing, only to see a hint of disdain in his eyes. He instantly understood that seeking advice was only an excuse. In reality, Liu Xing wanted to force him into a difficult situation. As a junior, he could naturally seek advice from his senior. However, this was also dependent on the situation, no? Moreover, a junior couldn't force their seniors to answer their questions. Whether or not the seniors answered was completely up to them. However, Liu Xing had purposefully raised his voice and attracted the attention of many people. If Ling Han refuted him now, it was inevitable that he would tarnish his reputation. This only seemed like a small matter, yet it was a clear reflection of Liu Xing's malicious intentions. "Fourth uncle, you're not afraid, are you?" Liu Xing asked. He laid another trap, preventing Ling Han from retreating. He was feeling extremely smug in his mind. "You dared to bully my brother, so just see how I dispose of you. Moreover, I'm doing everything within the rules, so who can accuse me of anything?" Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Seniors naturally have a responsibility to explain difficult questions to juniors. What don't you understand? Ask away. This is child's play. Do you think you can stump me just because I'm a 2-star alchemist at the 3rd refinement? Quite the contrary." Ling Han possessed a reincarnation tree, so his theoretical knowledge was extremely vast and rich. He was simply lacking in practical experience. Liu Xing's smile grew even wider, and he said, "I've been refining the 4 forms bone transformation pill recently, and I'm slightly confused about the proportions of ingredients and how they should be used together. Can 4th uncle please explain this for me?" Everyone shook their heads upon hearing this. Just how many alchemical pills existed in the world? In fact, even 4-star grandmasters could only refine a relatively small percentage of alchemical pills. This was because mastering a new alchemical pill would take far too much time. Ling Han was so young, and it was likely that he hadn't even become a 2-star alchemist yet. Right now, however, Liu Xing was actually asking him about a 3-star alchemical pill. Wasn't he purposefully putting Ling Han in a difficult spot? Anyhow, Liu Xing's question about proportions was still okay. As long as one had read over the pill recipe before, this shouldn't be a problem. The memory of Celestials was naturally very good. However, to explain the details of how each ingredient should be used together? This was far too difficult. If one hadn't mastered the pill recipe, how could they explain this? Chapter 1953 Bring me tea, massage my back. Chapter 1953 Bring me tea, massage my back. Everyone turned their gaze to Ling Han. They were waiting to see how he would reply. If everything went as they expected, he would go beet red in the face, and then stomp off in anger and embarrassment. However, Ling Han's expression remained calm and composed. At the same time, he couldn't help but muse at this coincidence in his mind. This was because he had also started to investigate 3-star alchemical pills recently. He was investigating 5 in total, and one of them was none other than the 4 forms bone transformation pill. "You've gifted this to me on a platter." Ling Han purposefully pondered for a moment, and it was as if he were racking his brains for an answer. "Fourth uncle, it can't be that you don't even know about the 4 forms bone transformation pill, right?" Liu Xing immediately said. This was a vicious blow. "Now, hurry up and scurry off." Ling Han smiled calmly before finding a seat, and saying, "Before asking your seniors for advice, shouldn't you offer them some tea?" "TSK. You're even putting on airs now." Liu Xing chuckled coldly in his mind. In his eyes, Ling Han was trying to put him in a difficult spot instead. His intention was to wriggle free from his difficult situation. This was called defending by attacking. You have some skills. However, it's a shame that you've already fallen into my trap. How can I let you jump out? Yes, yes! Lu Xing answered with an expression of respect. He commanded the servants in the room to pour some tea, which he then brought forward for Ling Han. He appeared as respectful as could be. See? My performance is flawless, and there's nothing you can complain about. More and more people gathered in the surroundings. Some were simply here to see a show, while others were here because they were curious about Ling Han. They wanted to see if he was genuinely a skilled alchemist. After all, he was Xiao Lixing's junior brother, so he couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han crossed his legs before reaching forward with his right hand. Veins bulged on Lu Xing's forehead, yet he still gritted his teeth and bowed down as he placed the cup of tea in Ling Han's hand. I'll let you be smug for now. In a moment, I'll see how you cry. Ling Han started to slowly sip the tea. By doing this, he wasn't necessarily trying to mock Lu Xing. Instead, he was also recalling the refinement technique of the four forms bone transformation pill in his mind. This was a process of carefully thinking over the problem. After all, he had also just started to learn about this alchemical pill. His understanding of it was astonishing, yet he was still relatively lacking in practical experience. Regarding some detailed problems, he genuinely had to refine the alchemical pill himself before he could get a solid grasp on them. He was the Alchemy Emperor, so after pondering over this question for a moment, he was already confident that he could give a satisfactory answer. However, he still continued to slowly sip his tea in a leisurely manner. In fact, he appeared so relaxed that many people wanted to punch him. Others might not know, but Lu Xing was definitely feeling extremely frustrated at this moment. Ling Han was definitely doing this on purpose. He was forcing him to bow and nod like an obedient servant. To say nothing of the bulging veins on Lu Xing's forehead, even the surrounding onlookers were starting to become impatient. You're just drinking tea, so is there really any need to blow it 10 times before each sip? Will the tea burn you to death if you blow it fewer times? You're a severing mundane tear cultivator. If you're truly burnt by tea, then won't that be a massive joke? I'll endure this, I'll endure this, I'll endure this. Lu Xing continued to repeat in his mind. As long as he endured this, it would soon be time for Ling Han to make a fool of himself. However, he hadn't expected Ling Han's counterattack to be so precise and ruthless. He had forced him to act like a servant in public. This was far too embarrassing. However, now that it had already come to this, he was naturally even more unwilling to give up. He could only grit his teeth and persist. After a long while, Ling Han finally finished drinking his tea. Lu Xing breathed a sigh of relief. The surrounding onlookers also heaved a sigh of relief. Ling Han was far too good at building up suspense. Ling Han handed the empty cup to Lu Xing, and Lu Xing naturally accepted it with respect. He then said, "Fourth uncle. My back is feeling a bit tight, help me massage it." Fuck. Lu Xing felt a strong urge to kill someone. Flames were about to erupt from his eyes. However, he gritted his teeth and continued to console himself, telling himself that he couldn't abandon all of his previous hard work. Otherwise, he would truly become a servant for nothing. He walked behind Ling Han. Thump, thump, thump. He started to massage Ling Han's back. The Empress, Hu Niu, and the others were all wearing faint smiles. This person actually dared to challenge Ling Han? Didn't he know that Ling Han had been trained by the large black dog? Lu Xing was truly starting to feel some slight regret now. He had yet to humiliate Ling Han, and yet he was already being toyed around with. He was genuinely worried about whether his heart could take this any longer. However, he had already reached such a point, so how could he give up halfway? He forcefully suppressed the flames of raging fury in his heart. He was eagerly awaiting the time when Ling Han finally made a complete fool of himself. This was also the motivation that allowed him to endure this humiliation before so many people. Go on. Continue with your arrogance. After massaging Ling Han's back for a long time, Liu Xing forcefully suppressed his anger and asked, "Fourth uncle, are you satisfied now?" "My legs," Ling Han said in a relaxed voice. "Fuck your mom. Don't need massaging," Ling Han continued. Liu Xing almost choked upon hearing this. "If you don't need it, then you don't need it. What's the point of specially mentioning it? Are you trying to frighten me to death? Then, fourth uncle, can you answer my question now?" he asked in a respectful voice. However, he was actually gritting his teeth in anger. Ling Han coughed and said, "My throat seems to be slightly parched again." Liu Xing's face involuntarily twitched when he heard this. His fists were clenched, and he could barely stop himself from punching Ling Han in the face. Ling Han looked as detestable as could be. "Forget about it. You've also worked very hard," Ling Han said. Liu Xing finally regained some composure upon hearing this. If Ling Han had truly ordered him to bring another cup of tea over, he would have definitely jumped up in arms. "Okay, let's talk about the refinement of the Four Forms Bone Transformation Pill now," Ling Han said with a smile. He stopped toying around with Liu Xing. In his eyes, this was only a minigame before the grand celebration. He would use it to pass some time. His expression became solemn, and he started to explain the refinement process. In the beginning, everyone was looking on with a faint smile. They were treating this as nothing more than a show. However, as time went on, their expressions gradually became serious. Ling Han explained profound concepts in simple and understandable terms, and his explanation of the refinement process of the Four Forms Bone Transformation Pill was extremely in-depth and engrossing. Everyone nodded as they listened to him, and they felt as if they could immediately succeed in refining the Four Forms Bone Transformation Pill if they were to try. Even Liu Xing's heart started to thump in excitement. Even though he had asked this question to screw with Ling Han, he did indeed have many confusions about refining the Four Forms Bone Transformation Pill. Right now, however, all of his questions were being answered by Ling Han. Ling Han continued to speak, and everyone's expression continued to become increasingly earnest. This was because Ling Han's explanation had already exceeded the realm of simply talking about the Four Forms Bone Transformation Pill. Indeed, he was already starting to explain other domains of alchemy. He was talking about the entirety of alchemy. Ling Han still had yet to become a Grand Master in alchemy. At most, he could only be considered as a small fry. However, he had already incorporated his own understandings while learning spirit refinement, and this had allowed him to forge his own path. Even though this path was still in its infancy, its foundation was much stronger than what most other people possessed. Right now, he was expounding these most fundamental principles. Everyone understood the fundamentals. However, few people could gain a deep and comprehensive understanding of them. "Hurry, come over here, there's a Grand Master explaining alchemy. Brother Fan, hurry up and come here. Otherwise, you'll regret this forever. Lin Qian, hurry up and call your senior brothers and junior brothers over." The surrounding alchemists hurriedly retrieved their transmission devices to call their friends and disciples over. To alchemists, this was definitely a grand gathering that they couldn't miss. This was an incredible opportunity for them to elevate their skills and understanding of alchemy. This was because most alchemists didn't need to learn about difficult or profound concepts of alchemy. Instead, they would see bigger improvements by simply reinforcing the fundamentals. Thus, more and more people gathered in the surroundings, causing the small area to become so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Chapter 1954 Revered by Everyone. Chapter 1954 Revered by Everyone. Some people were unaware of this situation, so they couldn't help but falter upon walking over. What's going on? Why are there so many people? Cultivators naturally had no interest in alchemy. They couldn't understand Ling Han's utterances either. Thus, they would immediately turn around and leave. However, it was a completely different story for alchemists. They were immediately engrossed by Ling Han's explanations, and they would involuntarily sit down to carefully listen to his remarks. This was a very strange scene. There was clearly a sea of people, yet the surroundings were especially quiet and tranquil. Apart from Ling Han's voice, no one else made any sound. They all wore expressions of respect and reverence as they fervently gazed at Ling Han. It was as if they were worshipping a divine deity. In some sense, Ling Han was indeed a god in alchemy. Only when the grand ceremony was about to begin did Ling Han finally conclude his explanation. Everyone stood up with an expression of yearning. Regardless of who it was, they all bowed deeply to Ling Han. Even three-star alchemists were no exception. In terms of grasping the fundamentals, Ling Han's understanding had already exceeded that of most three-star alchemists. Thus, even three-star alchemists had learned a lot by listening to his explanations. As such, they couldn't help but pay Ling Han their highest respects. They were convinced that Ling Han would definitely become a grandmaster in the future. In fact, he might even create history and fill the gap in alchemy in the Eastern Celestial Realm. He might become the first five-star alchemist in 100 billion years. They couldn't help but go numb with excitement upon thinking of this. Perhaps today's gathering would also be recorded in history forever, representing Ling Han's initial rise in the Celestial Realm. Lu Xing was left wide-eyed with shock and disbelief. He had come here to humiliate Ling Han, yet after half a day, he had instead given Ling Han a chance to gain fame and renown? Just look! Just how popular and reputable was Ling Han now? Just how foolish had Lu Xing been? Just how incredibly foolish had he been? It was actually he who had pushed Ling Han onto this divine pedestal. He was so vexed that his mouth was about to go crooked. Pa! At this moment, he suddenly felt a heavy weight landing on his shoulder. He looked over, only to see a hand. Live an honest life, and focus more of your attention on alchemy. Cultivate your heart, and learn to be a decent person, Ling Han said. This was a piece of advice from the bottom of his heart. He wasn't a petty person. Lu Xing was already working toward becoming a three-star alchemist at such a young age, and this was something that was worthy of praise. Thus, he advised Lu Xing to cultivate his heart and personality now. Otherwise, if Lu Xing hadn't been so talented, he wouldn't have even wasted his breath. He would have directly pummeled Lu Xing into smithereens. Lu Xing flushed red with embarrassment, and he didn't dare to look Ling Han in the eyes. Ling Han patted Lu Xing's shoulders again before confidently striding away. He didn't pay any more attention to him. Grandmaster Ling! Grandmaster Ling! Wherever Ling Han passed, the surrounding alchemists would all look over and greet him with a sincere smile. Even though Ling Han was still very far away from becoming a grandmaster, his explanations just then had elicited a strong feeling of respect from everyone. He was a selfless person, and he had shared his understanding of alchemy with everyone else. He had allowed all of them to reap huge benefits. Xu Feng's two senior brothers had also personally come to congratulate him on reaching the sixth refinement. They pulled Ling Han over to chit-chat with him, mainly asking about how Grandmaster Ziqing was currently doing. Among Ling Han's three senior brothers, the older they were, the smaller their achievements in alchemy. For example, even though both his first senior brother and second senior brother were four-star alchemists, they had only mastered the fifth spirit refinement, and had just barely entered the realm of grandmasters. Zhang Ning, Ling Han's first senior brother, most likely wouldn't be able to reach the sixth refinement. Meanwhile, Xiao Lixing, his second senior brother, still had a sliver of hope. However, it was actually Zhu Feng, his third senior brother, who had successfully taken this step first. He had already mastered the sixth refinement. Ling Han chit-chat with his three senior brothers for a long time. Afterward, Zhang Ning and Xiao Lixing both invited Ling Han to their residences. Ling Han happily accepted their invitations. However, regarding when he would visit them, this was hard to say. After all, he was also a very busy person. The grand celebration continued for 5 entire days. When it concluded, Ling Han hurriedly set off again, with his destination being the Three Blooms Valley. Strictly speaking, the Three Blooms Valley belonged inside the territory of the Calm Peace Heaven. However, wherever there were borders, there were naturally conflicts over claims. Moreover, the Three Blooms Valley was on the outer edge of the Calm Peace Heaven, so it was only natural that it was disputed by the bordering heaven. Otherwise, the celestial king of the wide prosperity heaven wouldn't have, accidentally, discovered the Three Blooms Valley and the fiery flame lightning strike wood. Ling Han and the others set off, and bewitching maiden Ro continued to shamelessly travel with them. This caused Hun Yo to continually glare at her. How could there be such a shameless person? If it weren't for the Empress stopping her, she would truly want to pummel bewitching maiden Ro into a pig head. She would then toss her as far away as she could. Under Hun Yo's disdain, the group of them traversed through mountains and waters for almost 3 months. Only then did they finally exit the wide prosperity heaven and return to the calm peace heaven. They then continued westward for another month before finally arriving at the Three Blooms Valley. Is this truly a valley? Ling Han gazed at the swarming clouds and mists before him. This valley was as vast as a sea, and there was simply no end in sight. The clouds and mists were like the waves of the sea, slightly undulating as they flowed. This was a magnificent sight. Among this vast sea, one could see 3 distinct mountain peaks. They looked much like 3 blooming petals, and it was from this that the Three Blooms Valley had received its name. Boom! A wave suddenly crashed over from the distance. This was a gust of wind. Upon wrapping around a cloud, it formed a peculiar and spectacular spectacle. However, the expressions of Ling Han and the others involuntarily changed. This gust of wind was far too terrifying. There were symbols of the great Tao swarming inside it, with each of them being paramount and profound. These were symbols that could easily shatter the heavens. Celestial King symbols! They all exclaimed in astonishment. No wonder the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King had said that even Celestial Kings couldn't forcefully obtain the rare opportunity of this place. Just a simple gust of wind was already like the frenzied attack of a Celestial King. Even an ascending origin tier elite would instantly die upon coming into contact with such a gust of wind. As for Celestial Kings, they wouldn't know which heaven these gusts of wind were equivalent to. In any case, only 9th heaven Celestial Kings could laugh before the might of heaven and earth and peer down on all matter. Only they could enjoy equal standing with the Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han and the others attempted to enter the valley, yet symbols of the great Tao would flash into appearance from time to time. These symbols were powerful enough to obliterate all matter, so Ling Han and the others naturally didn't dare to recklessly push forward. Right now, no one could enter this valley. Celestial Kings could most likely enter this valley, but they definitely couldn't venture into its depths, either. The will of heaven and earth was transcendent above all matter. According to rumors, there were very specific ways to enter this valley. One couldn't find any random place to jump down. There were petrifying regulations of gravity here, and the bottom of the valley was more so filled with a forest of razor-sharp stones that was imbued with the symbols of the great Tao. If one were impaled, they would instantly die on the spot. Even a physique as freakish as Ling Han's would be useless. Thus, they definitely had to find the correct entrance. Only by following this path could they safely arrive at the bottom of the valley. At that time, they could then look for the fiery flame lightning strike wood. After walking around for several days, Ling Han and the others finally found the correct entrance. At this moment, many people had already arrived before this entrance. Some of them Ling Han recognized, while some of them he didn't recognize. "Brother Ling!" Yan Xianlu and Lu Jie called as they walked over in unison. When they noticed each other, they couldn't help but falter and look over. "What's going on? Why is he also greeting Ling Han?" Ling Han smiled and said, "Brother Yan, Brother Lu." "Huh! Brother Ling, how do you know him?" Yan Xianlu and Lu Jie asked in unison. Ling Han smiled and said, "I took a trip to Guanhua City, and I became acquainted with Brother Lu there." "What? You're genuinely from the calm peace heaven?" At this moment, Lu Jie naturally understood everything. He immediately recalled Ling Han insisting that he was from the calm peace heaven. At that time, no one had believed him. In fact, even he had thought that Ling Han was purposefully making up an excuse to turn down his offer. He had even been slightly displeased at that time. However, who would have thought that this was actually true? Gasp! Chapter 1955 Shi Xiuwen arrives. Chapter 1955, Shi Xiuwen arrives. Brother Ling, you really are from the calm peace heaven? Liu Jie still asked, unwilling to give up. Ling Han nodded and replied, As true as can be. Liu Jie's eyes flickered, and after a while, he only darkly said, Then, after we enter the valley, it is inevitable that we will be on opposing sides. I will definitely not hold anything back. What is it? You want to fight? Hun Yo immediately piped in. Her attitude was very fierce. Liu Jie opened his mouth to say something, but then closed his mouth again. In front of Hun Yo, he really was not qualified to make any outlandish boasts. He looked deeply at Ling Han, and then turned around and left. Just as he had said, should they meet inside the valley, it was unavoidable that they would have a great battle. You seem to have gained his resentment? Yan Xianlu asked. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, It cannot be helped. Just let him be. What happened? Yan Xianlu asked again. Ling Han stroked his chin, and smilingly replied, It's complicated. They were just talking when Liu Han suddenly ran over, and said to Hun Yo, Even if you are a woman, I still want to be with you. Pooh! Yan Xianlu immediately spluttered. Even though he was known as a divine fetus that had been born on the celestial path, and was as calm and steady as a mountain, all of that had turned completely into nothing at this moment. He coughed endlessly, looked at Hun Yo, and then looked at Liu Han again, feeling completely blown over. Could it be that because it had been too long since he had roamed around, he was already outdated, and could no longer keep up with the trends? You are so annoying! Hun Yo declared impatiently. I know of a type of celestial medicine that can change gender, Liu Han said excitedly. I have thought it over for many days. I like you, and I can't give up on you. Nyo doesn't like you. Hun Yo grabbed one of Ling Han's arms. Nyo likes Ling Han, and only Ling Han alone. Ling Han. Liu Han's eyes swept over, focusing on Ling Han's face. Her expression instantly became icy cold, exuding a frosty killing intent. Since that was the case, then she would kill Ling Han off first. Ugly, do you want to die? Hun Yo, too, immediately blazed with killing intent. She was the most sensitive to killing intent. This ugly hag actually dared to show killing intent towards her Ling Han. Her first reaction was to kill her. Liu Han controlled her emotions, and only shot Hun Yo a dazzling smile before leaving without a second look backwards. She would kill Ling Han, but she would not do it herself. It would be too easy to do this. She only had to egg on the other monarchs to make a move, and with her beauty and status, it was completely a piece of cake for her to make others bite the bait. Yan Xianlu smirked and asked, Have I missed something? It was no wonder that Ling Han said it was complicated. It indeed seemed extremely complex. Lao Song and Shan Jitong also arrived consequently. The monarchs from the calm peace heaven had all arrived, but because there was a larger number of monarchs from the wide prosperity heaven. At present, only half had arrived, and they were all ranked below the top 10. Even so, when over a dozen monarchs arrived at the same time, all of them exuded the kind of aura that came from a ruler of their own domain, capable of causing one to submit to them. In the future, these people would definitely become celestial kings, so naturally their aura soared. The two sides were clearly divided, and stood on either side of the entrance. Conflict did not erupt, nor did any immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier elites appear to create a massacre, and ruin the many prodigies that had been accumulated for at least 10 billion years. The journey to this mystery realm could involve a great many celestial kings. Whoever dared to cause trouble here would simply commit a suicidal action. Thus, the battles this time would only take place among the severing mundane tiers. Roar! A loud battle cry rang out, just like the roar of a dragon, but also seemingly like a tiger's roar, so loud that even the mist in the valley vibrated endlessly. A young man was rushing over from the distance. His appearance was extremely primitive, with only a fur hide wrapped around his lower body. His hair had been tied into several dozen braids, each braid tied with an ornament that was made from a jade-colored bone. He was clearly only just one person, but as he ran over, it was like a frightening giant primeval beast bulldozing over. Any person or object that stood in his way would only be sent flying and shattered. Shi Xiuwen! Yan Xianlu stood abruptly, his hands involuntarily tightening into fists. His eyes blazed with fire, his fighting spirit burning brightly. This person was Shi Xiuwen? Ling Han took a second glance at that savage, but as his gaze focused, it immediately drew the attention of the other. Shi Xiuwen also turned to look at Ling Han, his eyes as sharp as blades that slashed rapidly towards Ling Han. Ling Han was completely unconcerned, but a divine sword leaped out of his eyes, greeting the other's incoming attack. Boom! Sword rays clashed, simultaneously erasing each other. This clash seemed to have resulted in a tie. Shi Xiuwen bared his mouth in a grin. He had only used 1% of his battle prowess in this blow, but he was sure that the battle prowess that Ling Han had used was definitely more than that. Hence, it was natural that he was the one who was superior. All of a sudden, his vicious nature exploded. With him sweeping his gaze over everyone that was looking at him, a bout of muffled grunts instantly rang out. Even monarch tears were no exception. They all turned their heads away, feeling a fierce pain in their eyes, while King Tears and Emperor Tears directly cried tears of blood. In the severing mundane tier, the superiority of monarch tier over emperor tier was the heaviest, which was equivalent to a yang soul against the fourth severance. Hence, even if they were emperor tiers, it was very normal that they still could not sustain the might of a glare from him. This guy was a little similar to Hu Niu, extremely vicious and filled with a primitive air. Shan Jitong and Lao Song couldn't help but feel their heads go numb. So this was a monarch tier of the wide prosperity heaven? Too powerful. Facing Yan Xianlu, even if they were no match for him, they at least had the courage to fight. At least they could be sure that even if they were no match for him, they would still be able to calmly retreat after the battle. But against Shi Xiuwen, they were like lambs that had encountered a fierce lion, only worthy of becoming his prey. Even the two of them, monarch tears, were like this, what more the others. All of them had lost all their drive, and could only tremble in fear. This kind of person. How were they supposed to match that? Moreover, Shi Xiuwen was only ranked 9th among the prodigies of the wide prosperity heaven, so what about the 8 people ranked higher than him? It was said that the top 3 were all freakish prodigies, and could single-handedly destroy the heavens, and were indescribably powerful. My hand is itching, who will fight me? Shi Xiuwen called out loudly. While he was asking who would fight him, his eyes were fixed on Ling Han. In his eyes only this person could barely stand against him in battle, and stepping on prodigies had always been his hobby. Delivering a blow to his opponent that would render his confidence to bits was one of his greatest pleasures. Wild Ape, Neo will come and beat you up! Hu Niu leaped out. She was not the type to care about any form of rules, and would rather move directly. Boom, an image of the rock appeared behind her. Immediately, she was using her full power. Clearly, Hu Niu was also excited by the thrill of battle, and gave Shi Xiuwen serious regard, treating him like a powerful opponent. So strong! Shi Xiuwen exclaimed in surprise, delighted. He gave a roar, and stepped up to meet Hu Niu midway. With a tremble of his figure, a massive golden giant appeared behind him. It was brandishing a stone pestle that harshly crashed towards the rock. This was a clash between the power of divine fetus of both sides. From a certain perspective, this was a clash between 2 celestial kings as well, though both had just released a sliver of their full might. The heights of the celestial king tier did determine the strength of the divine fetus, but it was also affected by the cultivator's own cultivation level. It was impossible that an ascending origin tier divine fetus would be no match for a severing mundane tier divine fetus. Boom, the giant clashed against the rock, bursting into an intense confrontation. Great Tao shattered, turning into countless fragments of seals that shot out in all directions. Brilliant light filled the skies, and nothing else could be seen. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.